Chapter 976 Madness for Hire Part 2. The scene left all the three spectators speechless, especially because the two alleged enemies moved in unison. They held their nose while bending their knees and moved their upper body in a wave motion as if they were drowning. After that, they abruptly stood up, making a finger gun with their left hand that shot a beam of light. They both dodged and said, "Dead on time." "I can't believe you're really one of us, Scrooge." Zalgrish burst into joyous laughter. "Me neither." Lith was still cringing from embarrassment. "I can't believe I avoided joining a frat house during college just to learn a fucking secret handshake to get along with liches," he thought. "What matters is that it worked, and we avoided a pointless fight. We must gift Kala something nice to thank her for all the secret information about the undead society she taught us." Solus tried to cheer Lith up, but even the kindest and wisest words sounded like a mockery when the one speaking them was laughing her ass off. "What are you doing here, and who are those guys?" Zalgrish pointed at Scrooge's helpers. "I'm here for the silver mines. I've stepped up my research since the last time we met, and I need both money and raw materials. As for them, allow me to introduce my servants to you. They are Thrud and Nalier." Lith lied all the way to protect both of them from further inquiries. "Good move, Grug. A lich always needs someone expendable. Ratpack, go mingle with your peers. Testalos, nimble. This is Ratpack, my assistant. He is dumb, slow, and clumsy, but he has a big heart. I know because I put it in his chest." Zalgrish laughed at his own joke and pushed Ratpack forward. "What about you?" Lith asked while the three assistants awkwardly looked at each other. "I'm not going to lie to you. I tried to recover the mines, but the collapsed mountains are too big to move and they make the ground too unstable. The array was something I left out of curiosity, to see if someone had better luck and maybe exploit their work." Zalgrish said, "Care to elaborate?" "If it was someone weak, I would have killed them to leave no witnesses, while if it was someone strong, I would have made them an offer they couldn't refuse." Zalgrish shape-shifted into the human appearance he had back when he was still alive. He now looked like a man 1.78, 5 feet 10 inches, meters tall with brown eyes, hair, and a short beard, who was offering Lith what looked like a business card between his right middle and index fingers. "Zalgrish Burkix, necromancer for hire." Lith read out loud. "It's my human alias for when I need shopping. I tried sending Ratpack, but somehow the cursed humans always discover his undead nature. I tried disguising him as a noble, a merchant, an adventurer, and even as a belly dancer, but nothing worked." Zalgrish snapped his fingers, changing Ratpack's outfit several times. Why the heck does the lich only change the clothes of his assistant whereas he shape-shifts himself? Everyone thought. My plan was to offer my minions as the workforce. They can work under all weather conditions, require no rest, no sleep, nor pay. All I ask in exchange is 50% of the mine silver. 50% is a lot. Lith blurted out. Way more than any workforce would cost. I don't see the allure of such an offer. My minions not only are loyal, but they can also defend the precious metal. They're a full package deal. Also, in case of refusal, I would kill my partner and renew my offer to their next of kin. Zalgrish laughed. I would like to point out that one has no guarantee Zalgrish's minions wouldn't just deliver the silver to him, but liches are prideful creatures. They wouldn't stoop so low as to lie. Also, I don't want to give him ideas. Lith thought. Nalier, resume the search while I discuss business with my fellow lich. Lith snapped his finger and his assistants out of their reverie. Why are you still here, Nalier? He asked after waiting for a few seconds. You mean me? The Razar pointed at himself. Isn't your name Nalier? Lith sneered. Really? Since when? Good gods, even Ratpack remembers his own name, Nemia. Now scram, Zalgrish yelled. The intensity of the lich's bloodlust made Naurin shapeshift and plunge into the ground so fast that he seemed to disappear into thin air. If my minion finds a way to the mines, we'll split everything 70-30, costs included. Lith said, 30-70, you mean? The mines were mine to start with, and mine are the minions. Zalgrish replied, no, 70-30. They were never yours. You were just stealing from the kingdom. Also, you collapsed the mines, and I'm the only one who can apply for the mining rights. With the current love people has for the undead, if they find you out, you'll never get a single piece of silver without spending 10 times its value. Lith said, 40-60, but only because I hate paperwork and you're right about the royal permits. Not having to kill anyone who sees the mines will save me a lot of resources. 60-40, because without my minion, there will be nothing to mine. Also, he can follow the veins or find new ones when the silver runs out. Lith replied. 50-50, Zalgrish said. 40-60, Lith replied. No, you thief. 60-40, Zalgrish snarled. Deal, Lith said before the Lich could realize he had fallen for one of the oldest tricks in the cartoons. Deal. 60% to you, and the rest to me. Zalgrish had a triumphant tone that made Tista wonder if he actually knew math, or he just reversed whatever her brother said. The two madmen wrote everything down in duplicate and signed each other's copy of the document. By the time Naurin returned, they had even exchanged contact runes. He brought good news. The richest silver veins ran so deep that the ground was stable again. The Razar had prepared an underground map that Lith hid inside his pocket dimension, refusing to show it to Zalgrish. I'll contact you as soon as I'm done with the paperwork. Don't forget our deal and don't make mistakes. If anyone catches wind of the silver, we're both screwed. Lith said. I won't. I swear it on my phylactery. Zalgrish struck his fist where his heart was supposed to be, making Rat Pack whine. That's a phylactery? I thought it was just a powerful artifact. I need to study it at the best of my abilities. Solus thought. Master, no sense hiding phylactery if you tell where it is. Don't worry, Rat Pack. I'm sure that no one noticed my subtle gesture. Zalgrish acted as if they weren't right there in front of him. It was a pleasure doing business with you, Groucho. Rat Pack, say goodbye to your new friends, Ding and Dong. Master, name's wrong, and we not friends. We said nothing all time. Rat Pack said while another red gate appeared. They didn't try to kill you, and that's what real friends do. Take a lesson from me and Blordflux. If I don't reply to your first 100 or so calls, don't take it personally, Bongbat. I'm just that busy. But Zalgrish dragged Rat Pack along and closed the dimensional tunnel. Chapter 977 Plans and Preparations Part 1. That was intense. Naurin didn't know whether to laugh or cry at the Lich's antics. The only thing the Razar was certain of was that he needed a long bath to wash away the cold sweat he was drenched into. Even Dawn's minions were nothing compared to such a powerful undead. I get that he changed your name with every phrase, but if you're Blordflux, then who was Bongbat supposed to be? Tista asked. Always me. Zalgrish forgets even the names he makes up if they are too long. By the way, excellent work, Naurin. We'll split everything 50-10-40, costs included. Lith said. I have no money. The Razar blurted out, realizing the catch. I'll lend you the starting capital, and you'll return it to me with the first profits. Lith shrugged. Faluel wanted him to befriend the Razar before asking for information about the fringes. Yet Lith had no idea how to build a relationship without enduring life and death situations together or business. Lith chose the latter option because any plan to endanger Naurin's life on purpose just to save him could easily backfire. You suck with human relationships. Solus sighed. You didn't trust Orion until he gave you the cloaking ring, and now you try to bind your light mastery teacher with money? I do suck and you know it. Cut me some slack. Progress, not perfection. Lith replied before warping the group back to Jambel, where the sergeant missing his right arm was waiting for them. See what I mean? You never bothered asking his name. Solus thought. How do you feel, Sergeant? According to Lith's calculations, the potions the man had ingested would provide him with all the nutrients needed for the procedure. Turl Snowfield, sir. Bloated is the best word to describe my condition. The sergeant burped and quickly apologized for it. He was at the third potion, and the first one had already been fully assimilated. Turl felt as if someone was stuffing him with food non-stop, to the point that he had been forced to take off his armor because of his bulging belly. Excellent. A short chant and random gestures conjured a stone chair out of the dust floating in the air. Lith forced Turl to sit and used an air blade to rip open the sergeant's shirt at the shoulder level, leaving everyone flabbergasted. You two provide him with the necessary vitality. I'll do the rest. This is how those like us should work. Lith said, referring to all those capable of using true magic. He didn't know if Naurin actually needed his guidance with healing magic, but Tista surely did. Also, by using assistance, Lith had a plausible explanation for what was about to happen. After a bit more gibberish and gestures, Lith touched the sergeant's forehead with 2 fingers, activating his Tier 4 healing spell, Bloom. Turl felt a sudden sting and an itch before the missing parts of his scapula and clavicle popped out of his flesh, reforming the right shoulder. Then, the humerus emerged from the shoulder joint, growing in length and size like a white sprout. Only once the bone was perfectly formed did Lith make the muscles, nerves, flesh, and circulatory system grow one layer at a time. Thanks to invigoration, he created a mirror image of the left arm the soldier still had down to the smallest detail. Unlike fake mages that had to complete the procedure in one go, Lith built one piece at a time. He used the imaging properties of his breathing technique to not just regrow the missing limb, but also to give the new arm the same connections the other had with the spine, so that the mirror limb would retain the muscle memory of the original. Unlike true mages, his training with Faluel's meditation techniques allowed Lith to dominate the light element even when it was coursing through Turl's body, allowing him to not blindly follow the left arm's template and be capable of fixing on the fly any imperfection he found. The same happened for the radius and ulna. First, they popped out the humerus, and only once they were fully formed did flesh and blood bloom, completing the forearm. Only the hand was now missing, but that required special attention. It was made of too many small, delicate bones to create all of them at the same time. "Drink another potion now," Lith ordered, and the sergeant obeyed. Turl was happy Lith had given him a chair, otherwise he would be with his ass on the ground like most of his colleagues. The shock from seeing such powerful magic in action had brought most of the spectators to their knees. The sergeant felt another sting as what looked like a white mist emerged from a hole in his newly formed wrist. The vapor grew and spread before turning solid and resembling a cobweb. Except it wasn't made out of silk, but of bones and cartilage that quickly turned into a perfectly formed hand. The different layers of muscles, nerves, and tendons formed one at a time, but in such a quick sequence that the process made Solus think of a gruesome anime transformation sequence. "It's done. Do," Lith attempted to say. "Yes." Turl cut him short while he moved his new arm and flexed his fingers one by one. "Yes, what? Do you feel all right? Does the arm work properly?" Lith asked. "Yes, you look like a god to me." The sergeant replied to Lith's earlier sarcastic questions. During the previous year, Turl had studied the procedure to allow himself to at least daydream about what would happen if he could afford it. Regrowing an arm usually required 6 mages and about half an hour. Yet for all he knew, Lith had done everything by himself, and the entire process had taken seconds. Actually, Tista and Naurin had provided him with vitality, and the procedure had lasted for over 5 minutes. But no one had noticed the passing of time. "This is no time for jokes. I used an experimental procedure that should give your right arm and hand the same skill you got with your left. It's not much, but assuming you practiced a lot since losing your arm, it should speed up your physical therapy." Lith said. "Wait, are you saying that you might have made me ambidextrous?" Turl took 2 coins out of his pockets, put one on each of his thumbs, and threw them in the air before catching them. The right arm was slower and clumsier, but he still succeeded. "Are you left-handed?" Lith had never taken the possibility into account. "Yes. Is that a problem?" "Not at all. Don't forget to eat a lot, and contact a healer to follow your recovery. The strain from the procedure will make you feel sluggish for a while, so I advise plenty of rest. Let me know if there are any issues, and if you're really ambidextrous now." Lith said. "How can I repay you?" Turl tried to stand up, but his knees refused to comply. Exhaustion and emotion paralyzed his legs. "I'm an archmage and one of the 4 best healers in the kingdom. Jambel has offered me hospitality and many gifts. This is the least I could do." Lith said. "Once I obtain the mining rights, my friendship with the guards will smooth any mess Zalgrish might make. If his undead have even one fraction of his quirks, accidents might happen while delivering my share of silver." Chapter 978 Plans and Preparations Part 2. On top of that, people like Turl will take good care of my stuff until I come collecting it. He actually thought. The man started sobbing and grabbed the edge of Lith's robe to kiss it in a sign of devotion, creeping him big time. "Calm down, Sergeant. There are no gods, just good mages doing their jobs," Lith said while stepping back. "Archmage Verhan, I know I'm overstepping my bounds, but could you please visit the city hospital?" One of the soldiers that had managed to stand up said. Winter left several people scarred, and it will take a while before Baron Wylan can afford a good healer to take care of them. For cities like Jambel, it was unfeasible to move so many people to the nearest city with a mage capable of using tier 4 and 5 of healing magic. The best course of action was to pay the mage to reach the city and treat those who required professional help. Healing magic was no miracle. Up to tier 3, it simply sped up the natural recovery process of all kinds of injuries, but it was incapable of treating organs damaged by an illness, regrowing missing parts, or even fixing a badly healed fracture. To do that was necessary the intervention of someone who had access to the healer specialization that only the army, the association, or one of the 6 great academies could provide. Lith was about to find an excuse to refuse when he noticed 2 things. First, Tista was looking at him with big, puppy eyes like she did when they were little. Her little brother was her hero, and she pictured him way better-natured than he was. Second, the guard seemed too concerned for his request to be a selfless plea. Lith looked around, noticing that many of those present were holding their breath in expectation. Clearly, they had a friend, a relative, or a loved one in need of help. One grateful guard would turn a blind eye to Zalrish's antics from time to time, whereas several guards might cover up even big messes if necessity arose. Sure, but now I need some rest. There was only so much Lith could do without ruining his cover. Regrowing a limb with half the staff and time the white griffin usually needed was worthy of an archmage. Doing more would raise a flag for anyone who knew about Awakened and their powers. If not for invigoration, Lith would have been exhausted. They warped back to the Baron's guest house, where the rest of the family was waiting for them. If you want to play savior, why don't you do it yourself? Lith asked Tista. You have all of my skills, just less experience. Because I'm yet a nameless mage, and I want to stay that way until I decide otherwise. She replied with a sigh. You are already in trouble with the ancient households for your achievements, and with the council for the same reasons plus awakening me. If I stand out too much, I'll offer them another target and force you to follow me during my travels. This way, instead, I'm just Litha's sister. Everyone underestimates me, and you don't have to worry about me. It's a win-win. Great thinking. Lith nodded. I would still like you two to accompany me to the hospital. We'll work faster, and I could use some help to not abuse invigoration too much. Can you teach me? Naurin said. In all my years as a healer, I've never seen such a technique. Regrowing a limb is easy, but they are usually a blank, clumsy slate, whereas the one you made already had a certain degree of coordination. Naurin was part of the Were People, an artificial hybrid between a human and a magical beast. He had 2 mana cores which allowed him to use all elements like a human and to use true magic like a magical beast. Yet he lacked the beast's instinct and the skills of an awakened. On top of that, he couldn't even awaken because his 2 identities were more stacked together than fused. Sure thing. Lith was glad to share his knowledge about anatomy and the spells he had created for his students at the White Griffin with the Rizar. That way, once their roles were reversed and Naurin taught him light mastery, Litha's request of sharing with him the Rizar's personal spells would sound fair. Why waste time to reinvent the wheel when I can access the collective knowledge of a tribe who practiced light mastery for centuries? I bet they have spells even Manohar can only dream of. Lith thought. By my maker, I hate you so much when you act like this. Progress my stone ass. Solus rebuked him. Lith ignored her and handed Camilla the map Naurin had drawn of the underground's silver veins. As a royal constable, rules, regulations, and bureaucracy were her bread and butter. The more information she had, the easier it was for her to cover all bases and fill all the paperwork necessary to make any claim the local nobles could make on Litha's future business groundless. Later, that same afternoon, Lith had Baron Wylan accompany the whole Verhen family to the city hospital. Aaron, Lyria, I can't bring you on the battlefield with me, but at least I can show you what your big brother does when he is away from home, Lith said while taking the children inside their first hospital ward. According to Solus, their mana cores were growing nicely, almost at the same rate as Lith when he was their age, and used accumulation. According to her estimates, they were likely to reach the yellow core of a Magico in a few years and later, maybe even a green or more powerful mana core that would allow them to attend one of the 6 great academies. I don't know if I'll have the time to teach and guide the children in the ways of magic, but I don't want them to grow up as spoiled brats. Magic is a gift that no one should take for granted. They must realize how lucky they are. Lith thought. The ward was filled with people that needed constant care, either due to wounds too severe to be cured in one session without depleting their life force, or to diseases of which normal healers could only treat their symptoms. Everyone on Mogur could use magic, but powerful mages were rare, and among them those who also had enough talent to learn a specialization were even rarer. Most of them would become nobles or serve influential households and trade their magical skills in exchange for political power. The rest would join the army, the Mage Association, or devote their life to magical research. A mage who spent even a bit of time helping others was about as rare as finding a unicorn holding a pot of gold under a rainbow. Why are these people sick? Aaron turned up his nose at the smell of disinfectants and blood that filled the air. Because not everyone has a mage for a brother or uncle. Lith explained. These people are just like mom and dad, but less lucky. Why did you bring us here? This place is not cool, it's smelly and sad. Lyria asked, feeling guilty for her tailor-made clothes that stuck out like a sore thumb amid so much misery. Chapter 9, 79 Gods Among Us Part 1. Because whenever I get back home, the first thing you ask me for is toys. Because I want you guys to realize that violence isn't cool. Whenever I was called to fix a mess, a monster had made lots of people miserable. Even after I defeated the monster, its victims were still in need of help. Lyria, Aaron, this is life outside of our village. If one day you'll wield the same power I have, I want you to remember this place. Magic is but a tool. It doesn't make its owner better or more righteous than others, just luckier. Lith said to both Aaron and Lyria. Then, he walked through the ward, needing only one touch to diagnose the problem and another to fix it. He left patients who had damaged organs or missing fingers to Naurant, explaining to him how to use the information obtained via the diagnostic spells Lith had taught him to its fullest. Before I introduced the study of anatomy, even treating a comminuted fracture required Tier 4 magic. By leaving to the patient's body the task of putting the bone fragments in place, they would usually do a lot of damage in the process. Now, however, a healer can determine their position and decide the best course of action. If there is a clear path to the bone, the fragments can be guided, dealing minimal damage. Otherwise, it's better to break them down to their components and regenerate the bone by using the fragments as nutrients. Lith said. Tista, instead, took care of those affected by congenital diseases, relieving them from the symptoms or curing the illness itself whenever she was capable of it. The difference between a professional healer and a rejuvenator like me is that, unless they alter its life force, the former can only help the body of their patient what it's supposed to do, whereas I don't need Tier 5 magic to cause changes. So, for example, when treating someone that suffers from the consequences of aging, only a rejuvenator can stimulate the body to fix itself according to how it was when it was younger. The information is still there, but it has been overwritten over time so that some conditions are now considered normal. What you have to do is to restore that information by spotting every single anomaly and making the body stop considering them as normal. That way, the patient's metabolism doesn't just heal the damage, but returns the body to the state it was before being injured. Another example is a badly healed fracture that leaves a leg crippled. Tier 3 magic is useless at that point because the fracture has naturally healed. A professional healer will be forced to break the bone again and then fix it properly, but then the patient will still bear the consequences of both fractures. A rejuvenator, instead, will make the body remember how the limb was supposed to be. The bone will then reassemble itself as if it was never broken in the first place. Many healers and patients tried to understand what Lith was saying, but without invigoration or the spells he had invented that simulated the effects of his breathing technique, none of his teachings made sense. Together, the three healers managed to clear a couple of wards before exhaustion became unbearable. Lith had forbidden Tista to use invigoration, so that her body would be forged by enduring the use of so many consecutive spells, and her mind would get used to retaining its focus even when she was tired. He knew from experience that using invigoration wasn't always possible, and he wanted Tista to be capable of healing herself in the case her throat was damaged. Lith had seen too many awakened die at his hand because they relied too much on their breathing technique. Lith and his family spent the rest of their vacation in Jambel peacefully. He used the time while the others took the afternoon nap to visit the local hospitals and teach his two apprentices as much as he could. Baron Wylan was moved by their dedication, and Lith was glad to earn the respect of the man who would be in charge of supervising his mines, while also finally having the opportunity to put Tista's skills to the test. Two birds with one stone. A few days before they went back to Lusha, the Verhens were going to the baker's district to buy a few sweets as souvenirs for their friends back home, when screams and the sounds of galloping horses filled the air. There must have been an accident. Damn nobles and their carriages. Lith said. Most people moved on foot, and the lack of traffic made them careless. That, coupled with the rush of coachmen who, just like their masters, gave little value to human life, was the recipe for a disaster. Yet what Lith saw darting from around a corner wasn't a stagecoach nor a young dandy on top of his purebred. It was a column of raiders rushing uptown, toward the Baron's mansion. What the heck is a bunch of criminals doing here? There's nothing worth stealing in Jambel, Lith said, regretting to have kept his visit a secret. No one in their right mind would assault a city with an archmage. Yet until his apprenticeship with Faluel started, his awakened rivals could still exploit the resentment that old and new magical bloodlines had against Lith for their ends. Lith didn't want to offend all those nobles whose offer for hospitality he had turned down, so he had asked the Baron to not divulge his whereabouts. That, coupled with the still lingering winter and Jambel's remote location, guaranteed that no one would learn about his vacation until it was too late. It must be for the Baroness' birthday, Ras said. The Baron told me that, this time of the year, all the local goldsmiths come here to give him the opportunity to pick the best present for his. Lith had used air and spirit magic to make sure that his family was safe on the sidewalk, but not everyone had the cold blood to consider a mercenary group as a minor annoyance and react accordingly. Out of fear, a parent failed to grab his son and drag him out of the road before the young man was run over by one of the horses. Even under normal circumstances, Lith had no care for the life of a stranger. Now that his family was on the line of fire, the whole Mogr could burn for what he cared. Yet once he turned around after making sure that everyone was safe and sound behind him, Lith's eyes fell unconsciously on the fallen youth. He had brown hair, a cracked skull, and was bleeding from his mouth due to internal injuries. Maybe it was just a coincidence, or maybe it was the cruel hand of fate, but between his wounds and the older brother holding the young man's broken body, the scene was exactly as Lith imagined it would have been if he had been there for Carl after the hit and run. His pupils dilated and his breath became ragged as the last images of his late brother flashed in front of Lith's eyes. He started to turn his head from the youth to Aaron non-stop, trying to calm down. That's not Carl. Your brother is dead. You have only one little brother now, and his name is Aaron. He needs you now, so don't do anything stupid. Lith thought while a cold sweat drenched his clothes. Chapter 980 Gods Among Us Part 2. No matter how hard Lith tried to hold back, his mind kept slipping back in time, to that dreadful night. Then, one of the invaders noticed Alina's golden necklace and steered his horse while extending his hand to rip it off. Unfortunately for him, Alina had picked up Aaron to make sure he wouldn't run away in panic and was holding the child in her arms. All Lith could see was a hand aimed at his mother's neck and a car rushing against his little brother. Lith's shadow came to life as he blinked in front of the thug with war between his hands while the angry blade was still enveloped in emerald flames from its summoning. A single slash was all Lith needed to cut down both the horse and its rider. They didn't shed a drop of blood thanks to the fire and darkness coursing through war. The corpses turned into a fine mist before even touching the ground, as if they had never existed. At the same time, the obscurity surrounding Lith spread out like a black sun and infected with spirit and darkness magic all the other shadows it touched. No matter if they belonged to a streetlight, a building, or a person, all the shadows joined together and enveloped the area. Close their eyes. They must not see this. That was all Lith managed to say before he blinked again. To the raiders, it was as if they were under the attack of an entire army. Lith seemed to be everywhere at the same time, striking without any notice and killing many with just a swing of his blade or hand. The darkness made it impossible to see further than a few meters, so the raiders slowed down and regrouped to leave no blind spot. Their horses were well trained and had seen enough magic to not panic. Keeping a cool head while assuming a perfect formation didn't spare them from their fate. It was the horses, not the men who formed the circle, which left plenty of space behind them for Lith to appear and decapitate them all at once with a circular swing of his blade. There, a woman in her early 30s pointed at Lith with her wand, unleashing a stream of Tier 3 lightning bolts. Her comrades followed her lead, conjuring a full-blown thunderstorm before war had yet to cut the last neck. To thrive in the harshness of the north, violence and bravado weren't enough. Even bandits were well-trained and equipped. Lith tried and failed to activate dominance. The lightning bolts were too many and too fast for his amateurish technique. Even his blue core, coupled with his mastery over air magic, wasn't enough to control so many powerful spells at the same time. Yet, he wasn't alone. The angry blade attempted to support its master's dominance, but having no idea how the ability worked, the sword failed as well. Yet War grasped Lith's intentions and activated the world mirror ability that Orion had infused the blade with after perfecting the enchantment. World mirror was boosted by Lith's and War's willpower, allowing it to absorb the thunderstorm inside the blade for a split second before sending it back against its casters after reinforcing the spells with Lith's mana. Each bolt of lightning was now so powerful that it killed its target despite the raiders' war-enchanted protections. The remaining marauders couldn't see a thing, but they could still hear the death cries and recognize the familiar voices. On top of that, each one of them knew what the smell of ozone mixed with that of barbecue meant. We've been set up. Jambel has mages. Retreat. We must. The man leading the charge froze in horror as his own shadow covered his mouth with one hand while chalked him with the other. The shock of seeing his own face twisted into a grimace of hate, staring at him through the white holes that replaced its eyes, made him unable to resist. Seeing the black mass attacking their leader, the raiders thought it was an undead. They lunged at the shadow, only to kill their comrade. "What the heck is that thing?" a woman asked after noticing that her axe met no resistance while passing through the living shade. Their horror turned into despair when black hands emerged from the ground, dragging the horses and their riders down while sucking their life force. Only then did they notice the white eyes belonging to the invisible army surrounding them. When the sun returned, there was no trace left of the invaders. Even the young man between his big brother's arms was now as fit as a fiddle. "Are you all right?" Lith returned by his family's side while his anger made clouds cover the sky and lowered the temperature by several degrees. "Yes." Raz nodded, half scared and half proud of his son. For most of them, it was the first time seeing him as a fighter instead of a healer. They had listened to Lith's tales about his fights, but not even holograms had prepared them for the brutality that a single swing of war held. Aaron and Lyria were still crying, whereas the triplets had slept through the events as if nothing had happened. "Bring them home and protect them until my return. I've seen this scheme in the past. Half of the bandits reach the target while the other half keeps the city gates open," Lith said to Tista and Naurin before warping to Jambel's entrance. The streets were on fire because the marauders had set everything ablaze to force the militia to split their focus. Between the burning houses, the injured citizens, and the enemies fighting for the control of the walls, Baron Wylan had his hands full. Lith appeared above the gates, understanding what had happened at a first glance. The first wave had disguised themselves as merchants and taken down the gatekeepers while the rest of their forces rushed out of their hiding spot. Judging by how fast and efficient they were, the invaders had carefully prepared the heist by learning the guards' routine and waiting for the moment when the security was more lax, high noon. Many cities had become too used to fighting mostly undead, and with the sun shining bright above their heads, the guards felt overconfident. Lith recognized many of the fallen soldiers. Some were relatives of those he had healed, others he had cured himself. He started to breathe regularly, conjuring with invigoration a pillar of blue light that connected the ground with the thunderclouds. With each breath he took, the storm grew stronger. With each breath he took, he separated allies from enemies. "Mjolnir." Lith raised his hands, and a natural lightning struck him. It coursed through his body, dealing him no harm as it was split into countless bolts that reached their marks with surgical precision. The current formed a tidal wave that swept the ground and reached even those who were still fighting inside the city walls. Yet only the invaders died. The battle and the thunderclap ended at unison. Lith lowered his arms, making the clouds disappear along with the mana controlling them. He came down slowly, needing only a wave of his hands to put out the fires and rescue those who had remained trapped inside their own homes until that moment. "Did you see that, son?" Baron Wyland said to Kodu while they were providing first aid to the injured. "That's why there's no need for prayers. You don't have to look up in the sky to see gods. They already walk among us." Chapter 981 Cold War Part 1. Valeron, capital of the Griffin Kingdom, throne room. The royal court was in an uproar, torn between the reappearance of an old enemy and the never-ending strife between the ancient and the new magical households. A conflict that was only getting worse as the Ernez's and the Dyrus's factions clashed more furiously by the day. Floria, taking a sabbatical despite the fact that the undead invasion was far from being resolved, had added fuel to the fire. She had disobeyed her commanding officer and abandoned her duty, an unprecedented act that made the matter of closing her trial even more urgent. Lady Ernez needs to be dishonorably discharged and sentenced for her crimes. Otherwise, all those who disagree with the laws of the kingdom will follow her lead and ignore their orders out of petty grudges. Archmage Dyrus called Floria only by her family name, disregarding all of her achievements as both army officer and mage. "Petty grudges?" Journey echoed the words with her voice filled with contempt. "Lord Dyrus forgets to mention that the laws of our kingdom guarantee Captain Ernez a speedy trial. Yet first she was suspended for months before being forced to resume duty because her country needed her skill and talent. Then she got stuck with the same workload as everyone else despite being treated as a traitor and kept in a limbo for over a year now. Now that a new equilibrium with the undead courts has been reached and the conscription is no longer needed, Captain Ernez has simply asked to either get a sabbatical or an honorable discharge. This court can't demand her to keep risking her life while all her merits and promotions are frozen. Not only does she deserve to be acquitted from all those ridiculous charges, but also a compensation for the service given and an apology for the unfair treatment she received. "Acquitted over my dead body," Archmage Onia, headmistress of the Black Griffin, said. 6 archmages, each one a pillar of the magical community, died in Kula because of her incompetence. As the representative of the academies, I demand justice. A pretentious claim since the Mephael household didn't press charges and neither did the White Griffin. Yandra's husband said. He wasn't willing to let his late wife's name be used for political plays. Enough. King Marone slammed his palm on the armrest of his golden throne. Both parties have expressed their opinion many times, and the only thing you agree on is that the trial of Captain and Mage Floria Ernez lasted too long. The Queen and I agree as well. We'll let you know our decision after carefully pondering all your arguments. His face was stern and confident, yet reality couldn't differ more. This is bad, dear, he said to the Queen via their mind link. On the one hand, Journey is right. The army has no right over her daughter now that the crisis is over. Forcing a mage to do anything without compensation sets a dangerous precedent that might lead to losing our best elements. On the other hand, Headmistress Onia is also right. The death of so many archmages cannot go unpunished. Someone has to take the blame for what happened and pay the price. I know, Silpha replied. That's why I assigned to Floria's unit only high-profile missions. Not to punish her, but because I hoped that she would achieve something so great that it would make Kolia's incident pale in comparison. Something like Litha's exposing the Bright Day's ploy or revealing the threat of the Golden Griffin. We wouldn't have been able to make him an archmage if not for such outstanding results. Alas, she wasn't lucky enough, and despite her accomplishments, she's not nearly in the clear. Silpha couldn't believe that if not for Kula, Floria would have already been promoted to lieutenant colonel, if not even raised to the status of great mage as well. Yet the reason you're here is to discuss the eventuality of Balkir's return, Marone said. His telepathic conversation with his wife lasted barely the blink of an eye. The king's words triggered an even bigger uproar that ended only when the queen activated one of the arrays in the room, forcing everyone to kneel and shut up. If you keep behaving like children, then I'll treat you as such, she said. As you know, under the cover of the night, several youths from the most powerful magical bloodlines of the kingdom have been crippled. Their assailants maimed their bodies beyond what even Tier 5 light magic can heal. Not only were their injuries deliberately so cruel that the youths need a rejuvenator, but they were poisoned with an unknown substance that crippled their magical prowess. According to our esteemed royal healer, it will take them months, if not years, to recover. Also, this card was left on the scene of every one of the attacks. Silpha showed a simple piece of paper, bearing a single word that struck fear in the hearts of all of those present. It said, "Future." The bulkier department confirmed that this is his penmanship, and that the venom employed is a variant of that he used during his previous attacks. That's why we've asked you to come here. We're all survivors, and if the god of death is really back, then we must stick together. To prevent further chaos, I'll allow you to speak one at a time. Several hands were raised, and the king picked one per faction. Your Majesty, with all due respect, I don't believe it's true. Archmage Dyrus said. Crippling instead of killing is not how bulkier operates. On top of that, I find it suspiciously convenient that only the enemies of Archon Ernest have been targeted. Given the seriousness of his allegations, Silpha allowed Journey to reply. I understand better than anyone else the cruelty of seeing a talented youth's future destroyed for petty reasons, so I'll forgive Archmage Dyrus for his cruel words. Her voice sounded pained but compassionate. That said, I'd like to remind you that my family has been the victim of several attempts performed by unknown assailants as well, and so happened to many of my friends. Many heads nodded at Journey's words. After she had captured Kalen the vampire and destroyed the branch of the Dawn Court and other, the undead had spared no effort to kill both her magicless sons, Gunnin and Tullian. Their detail was composed of men of the Queen's Court and Orion's best students, while their staff was actually composed of members of Journey's Myrock household. When the most stalwart defenders and the deadliest assassins in the kingdom joined forces, only death awaited their enemies. The only reason why we have suffered no casualty is that none of our heirs is so profligate that they need to ditch their detail in order to indulge in their vices. Besides, the strategy you described is hardly a novelty. It's what the undead have done for centuries when they want to forcefully recruit someone and bend their families to their will. It's likely that Balkier is helping the courts to strengthen their position inside the kingdom. The fact that the god of death isn't capable of fighting on his own anymore is well known, just like his undying hate for all of us. The real question is why my esteemed colleagues seem more interested in pointing fingers rather than finding a cure for their heirs. Chapter 982 Cold War Part 2. The kingdom is blessed with 4 rejuvenators, yet none of them has been called for help. I can't help but wonder if it's because the undead courts already got what they wanted. Journey said. Her words instilled the doubt that Dyrus's side might hide several snakes in the grass. The royals knew of the ongoing Cold War between the Ernest and the Dyrus, yet they couldn't dismiss Journey's allegations lightly. We did call them, but they all belonged to the White Griffin, Captain Ernest's academy, and they refused to help. Headmistress Onia said once the queen allowed her to speak. Mage Verhen said. Archmage Verhen. Silpha corrected Onia and raised the pressure of the array so much that the headmistress almost kissed the floor. Archmage Verhen said things I dare not to repeat in this hall. Marth and Vaster managed to restore the body of the only youth they accepted to visit, but claimed to be incapable of cleansing the venom. As for Manohar, it's Mr. Manohar to you. The mad professor corrected Onia and slammed her face on the floor with one of his constructs. Manohar. The royals rebuked him in unison. The headmistress is our honored guest, and you'll treat her with the respect she deserves. Isn't that what I just did? He sounded honestly confused. By the Great Mother. Marone clenched his temples that felt as if they were about to burst open, such was the headache the god of healing gave him. Why every time I want him to be here, he's absent, whereas he never misses an audience when I want him out of my hair? The king thought. This man is a curse and a blessing at the same time. Silpha replied. Why did you refuse to help them? The queen asked. Because even though I don't like the old hag Ernest, I like that bunch of his beans even less. I mean, unless we go down their family tree, their latest achievement is lighting their own farts, yet they act all high-end. Manohar. The royals cut him short. I mean, this lovely granny and I have our differences. He pointed at Journey, who couldn't get angry since Gunnin had given her grandchildren for a few years now. But we respect each other, whereas I don't even know those guys. I've got no obligation to help them, unless your majesty orders me otherwise, of course. The god of healing gave the royals a small bow, hoping for the best. With each order the royals gave him, one of his escapades would be pardoned. After clearing 5 branches of the undead courts and chasing Night out of the kingdom, Manohar only needed a couple of pardons to get out of hot waters. Not yet. The bulkier department and all academies are studying the new venom as we speak. They only need some time and luck to figure it out. Silpha shook her head, making the nobles groan. Manohar had recently returned. Giving him the means to safely run away again was a terrible idea. I'd like to point out that, even though Archon Ernest is right about the undead courts crippling youths to discipline their families, and about how it was due to the victim's stupidity that the attacks were successful, some of the witnesses claim to have seen a diminutive figure dressed in black escape from the crime scene. Duke Nuragor said once the king gave him permission to speak. He was Callion's father, and his grudge towards the Ernas ran deep. The Duke was already planning his son's marriage with Floria when he had received the news that she had not only ended their relationship, but also humiliated Callion in front of the royals. Are you suggesting that I did it? Journey was outraged at the accusation. The assailant worked alone, was short, and your world-renowned needles would match the puncture wounds that crippled those poor youths. So yes, the thought that you might want to get even with us crossed my mind more than once. The Duke said, "That's impossible," the king said while sweeping the air with his arm to firmly reject such an idea. Archon Ernest works around the clock and is rarely alone. There are plenty of witnesses who can confirm where she was during most of the attacks. More than once she was here to update us about the latest developments of her investigations. The king's words put no one at ease. They only made Journey appear as an even more fearsome opponent to her enemies and allies alike. They were certain that she was behind the attack and that she had left on purpose enough clues to be recognized. Except for the royals, all those present believed that she was sending a message that said, "If you destroy my daughter's career, I'll destroy your children's lives, and with them the future of your households." Everyone knew how hard it was to replace a magically talented heir who was also a good ruler for their lands. Velandyrus was the living proof of how 3 generations of hard work could easily crumble. After seeing how even the mad professor had sided with her, the members of the royal courts believed that in order to achieve her revenge, Journey had agreed to work with Balkia. The members of the undead courts, instead, after she had systematically destroyed their branches in the Griffin Kingdom, exposed the identities of their elders who had remained hidden for centuries before her arrival, and slain several of their champions, believed that Balkier worked for Journey. Blood Desert, Forgotten Plume Tribe. A few weeks ago, right after Manohar was done with his task and had accepted Orion's offer for help. After almost losing at the Black Knight's hand and seeing how versatile hard light constructs were, Ilium Balkier now diligently practiced light mastery, creation, and chaos magic every day. Manohar might be insane, but he was right about one thing. If Night decided to remain and fight after losing her host, if not for her wounded pride and her obsession with me, she might have easily finished me off. I was too weak to defend myself even against her crystal form. To master higher tiers of chaos magic and keep my creations from crumbling after a few minutes, I need to deepen my understanding of light magic. He thought. Thanks to all the years spent studying both undead and abominations, there was little Balkier ignored about the darkness element. Just like Lith, he had discovered the art of shaping light through his studies about darkness. The 2 disciplines were tightly interconnected, and at high levels, they shared many more similarities than the average mage would ever think. Most people believed that each element had its opposite, whereas Balkier knew how wrong they were. All the 6 elemental energies were able to coexist in both the world energy and the mana all things on Mogar possessed. There was no conflict, only a harmony that had to be upset to trigger their destructive abilities. It was a mystery so deep that none of the Guardians had accepted to teach him, and to the study of which he devoted every minute that he didn't spend with Ligane to study the monster abomination hybrids, or with his family. "I'm sorry to bother you, dear, but you have guests." Again, Eos Balkier, Ilium's wife, pulled the curtain of his tent open, letting sunlight illuminate her husband's lap. Chapter 983 Blood Judgment Part 1. Balkier worked in complete darkness so that he would be able to study the smallest imperfections in his constructs and how his state of mind affected their properties. Eos was a lovely woman in her mid-30s, about 1.62 meters, 5 feet 2 inches, tall, with shoulder-length dark brown hair and deep brown eyes. The white linen dress she wore emphasized her bronze skin, typical of the people of the desert. Damn merchants. I spent a lifetime lying low and they ruined it in a matter of seconds. I swear, the next time they come here I'm going to. First, I don't think the merchants are at fault. They are loyal to Overlord Salark and they wouldn't spread your secret like that. Eos cut him short. Second, it's the same guy from the last time, but he brought a lady friend along. Friend? Balkier was flabbergasted as he was incredulous. Someone like Manohar has no friends, let alone a girlfriend. Bring me to them, dear. Manohar and Journey were quietly waiting in the middle of the village, surrounded by armed guards ready to attack the moment the intruders attempted something funny. They weren't actually a threat to their unwanted guests, but Journey respected their bravery and loyalty. Unlike Manohar, who always wore his professor robe, Journey was covered from head to toe by one of the characteristic traveler's outfits of the desert that left only her hands and eyes exposed. The turban hid her blonde hair, a shawl covered her face, and makeup made her skin look bronze. There was no way to hide her sapphire blue eyes that drawn much attention since they were a rarity for Southerners. Balkier looked at them with life vision and was impressed by the fact that the newcomer was as magically weak as her equipment was outstanding. He led them to a tent where they could speak privately, offering them seats and hot tea while waiting for an explanation. I won't mince words with you. Journey removed her headgear, revealing her foreign origin. I don't like you, nor did I forget all the tragedies you've put me through, yet I can't condemn your methods. If I had your talents, in your shoes I would have done much worse. I don't care what you think. Tell me why you are here and how you convinced Manohar to bring you along. The odd relationship between the two had piqued Balkier's curiosity. Manohar had yet to crack any stupid joke, say something inappropriate, or act as if he owned the place. On the contrary, he was sitting straight while drinking his tea, opening his mouth only to say please and thank you to Eos. Balkier could barely recognize the god of healing in the man in front of him, which made him wonder what kind of person could succeed where even Salark had failed during their previous meeting. I'm here because our interests align. You have a vendetta against the Griffin Kingdom's upper echelons, and so do I. My enemies have no qualms using underhanded tricks to get what they want, and to make matters worse, they have the law on their side. Which leaves me with few options and not at liberty to be picky with my allies. As for Manohar, I must thank you for showing him the importance of good equipment. He doesn't want to suffer any more defeats. The word defeat made Manohar choke on his tea. And I need his help to make sure my plan goes without a hitch. A plan that requires your assistance as well. Journey then explained what her intentions were and how she planned to use the ongoing war with the undead as a cover for her operation. Balkier was a smart man. No matter what lies she could come up with, he would understand the truth the moment her plan got into motion. Let me get this straight. Balkier said, you want to exploit me and the undead courts for your agenda, pinning the blame on us to keep your social standing. Why should I help you, and why do you need a crippling rather than a killing venom? Because I know the details of your deal with Overlord Salark. You can't set foot or even send a minion inside the kingdom borders, yet it doesn't prevent you from helping a third party. I'm offering you the chance to borrow my knife and make those idiots tremble at your name again. As for the killing, it would mean giving them an easy way out. Every member of the court has lost enough people to learn how to deal with grief. If I were to kill their heirs, they would simply pass the title on the next in line of succession. Crippling them, instead, means giving my enemies hope. To make them waste time and resources in the search of a cure while sowing discord at the same time. Journey took a pause, letting Balkier figure out the rest on his own. You want to split each household into two factions. One that wants to cure the current heir and the other that wants to replace them. A brilliant plan indeed. He said. 2. She laughed. You're an optimist. The more candidates a household has, the more factions will form. Each one of them will seek external help to further their own agenda, leaving their households open to betrayal. At some point, they will be so busy dealing with their internal conflict to be incapable of keeping an eye on me. That's the moment when I'll strike. I'll expose their plots and crimes against each other, making their households implode. Yet all of my planning is just hot air unless you give me the means to turn it into reality. Balkier looked into Eos's eyes, hearing her silent plea to refuse the deal. His wife was a sweet woman and a mother. She couldn't even fathom how could Journey be so cruel to innocent children just to avenge her own daughter. Eos had tried for years to convince her husband to let go of his grudge. She understood that some things couldn't be forgotten, let alone forgiven. All she wished for was that her husband could finally make peace with his past and focus on what they had built together. If you want my help, then you'll have to accept my conditions. I'm not really interested in new magical bloodlines. Those who I really hate are part to the so-called ancient households. I want you to add the following names to your hit list. Balkier handed Journey a piece of paper containing several names. Most of them belonged to those who had sided with Dyrus to stop the rise of the Urnus. Some of them had remained neutral, or she had never heard about them, and a few were her allies. Deal. Journey offered him her hand, and Balkier shook it. This list is actually a huge help. By giving those people special attention, Balkier will be the most plausible suspect. Alienating some of my allies is an acceptable risk. In battle, collateral damage is unavoidable. After the matter with Foria is resolved, I can ask the royals to have Manohar cure them. It will strengthen the loyalty in our ranks and cause even more despair to our enemies. She thought. After returning home, Journey didn't share that part of her plan with anyone but her cousin Dida Myrock. They were so similar that sometimes she acted as Journey's body double and Dida's combat prowess matched her own. Chapter 984 Blood Judgment Part 2. Journey gave her cousin the special paper with Balkier's calligraphy, the hit list, and the venom, trusting her judgment about when and how to strike. The less Journey knew, the more natural her reaction would be when she received reports of the attacks, and the lack of an alibi from time to time was the small flaw her cover needed to be perfect. Valeron, capital of the Griffin Kingdom, throne room, present day. This isn't the first time I hear such wild accusations. Journey's voice was indignant. Yet this never before someone dared to throw them in my face right in front of my peers and the royals themselves. Duke Nuragor has slandered my name, and I demand justice. I invoke the right of blood judgment. If not for the array sealing the mouths and the limbs of those present, the room would have gone into an uproar. The blood judgment was an ancient ritual dating back when the Griffin Kingdom had been first unified, and most feudal lords needed a way to settle grudges with their neighbors without causing a civil war. Valeron, the first king, had forbidden nobles to have armies of their own, yet they were still entitled to have personal guards. Each side would appoint a champion that would fight until the first blood was shed or the opponent surrendered. The ritual forbade the use of any kind of magic, even chore magic and artifacts. It allowed households who lacked the talent or the money to have a powerful mage among their ranks to defend themselves and also to avoid casualties. To avoid one challenge triggering another, Valeron had decreed that killing the opponent resulted in a defeat, and that to issue a blood judgment, the offended party had to provide solid evidence of the damage suffered. The entirety of the court had witnessed the events, putting both the king and Duke Nuragor in a bad spot. The king wanted to keep things from escalating further, while the duke had no desire to put so much at risk. Losing a blood judgment meant not only to be forced to publicly apologize to the winner, but also to be banned from all kind of social events for a year and pay half of the household's annual income as compensation. Becoming a social pariah would cause the loser to remain out of the loop and to be cut out of the major business enterprises. It would cripple both the loser's wealth and influence in the long run. On top of that, the crown would pay the penalty up front, so that the defeated party would not be indebted to the winner, but to the royals. Not paying a gambling debt would worst-case scenario incur reproach, whereas not paying what was akin to taxes meant having their assets seized. Valeron had devised blood judgment to be as unpleasant as possible, so that no one would invoke it without a very good reason. The deeper the pockets of a noble were, the less inclined they would be to put their wealth at stake on a whim. Archon Urnus, the Nuragor and Urnus households are valuable assets for the kingdom. The Duke's family recently gave us a great mage. I'm sure he's willing to apologize for his rudeness if you are willing to reconsider the challenge. Marone glared at Nuragor while trying to solve the issue peacefully. Duke Nuragor had no desire to ask for Journey's forgiveness, and he wasn't scared of losing some money. He was scared of losing a shitload of money. To add insult to injury, the ritual required that the loser had to kneel. Between the blow both his wallet and his reputation would take in the case of defeat, he couldn't afford to gamble several generations of hard work out of something as trivial as pride. The Ernest situation was completely different. Even if they lost, Journey would still be an Archon, Orion would still be one of the best royal forge masters, and none of their children's careers would be hindered. Aside from being the heir of House Ernest, Gunine had no career while Tullian was the black sheep of the family. Floria was already ruined, Freya was just a lowly mercenary, and Quilla was an assistant professor. If someone like Manohar could still retain his spot after committing countless crimes and social blunders, the academic world wouldn't so much as raise an eyebrow at something like a lost blood judgment as long as she produced results. Caolian, instead, was both the heir and the only mage of the Nuragor household. Becoming a social pariah would cripple his chances for a good marriage, while losing the money would force him to put his magical career on hold. To not share his merits with anyone, Caolian worked for no institution and used for his missions mercenary groups that accepted a non-disclosure agreement in exchange for a hefty sum. This strategy had allowed him to quickly rack merits, but it also made Caolian dependent on the family wealth to found both his magical research and the jobs he carried out for the association. "Words are cheap, Your Majesty," Journey replied before the Duke could swallow his pride and apologize. Accepting hollow apologies after being publicly accused of assault and murder would be like admitting he's right. The words of a powerful man have weight, hence they should also have consequences. Since I'm the offended party, I will also be the Ernest's champion. Do you have the guts to stand your ground on your own as well, dear Duke? Duke Nuragor cursed his big mouth one last time and started to think about how to exploit Archon Ernest's bravado. Demanding the blood judgment to take place now and revealing the identity of her champion would be a perfect move in a bard's tale, but this is reality. Rightful anger gives her no special ability, and she's still a middle-aged short woman. Without the magical marvels her husband provides her, Journey is not even half the fighter she usually is. Maybe this is actually a blessing in disguise. With all the money I'll get from her Grand Duchy and Dyrus's support, my lands will develop dramatically, he thought. Your Majesty, I'm ill-fit and prepared for this unexpected challenge, Duke Nuragor said. I'm forced to ask your help to contact my chosen champion, Lord Ifremeierhain. Journey flinched hearing that name. It belonged to one of her husband's deputies who had quit the Knight's Guard because his love for money outclassed that for his own country. He was a young, talented man that after turning mercenary had achieved many great feats and racked lots of merits that he had converted into the title of Baron with its attached lands. Once the king accepted, it took a few seconds for Lord Eierheim to step through a gate and minutes to define the terms of his deal with Duke Nuragor. Journey used that time to get changed and study her opponent. Ifremeierhain was a man in his late 20s, about 1.9 meters, 6 feet 3 inches, tall, with military short pitch black hair and ice blue eyes. Having enrolled in the army at 16, he had nearly 15 years of battle experience, and his body was still at its prime. Every muscle of his body was well-toned and trained with the discipline Orion had ingrained in his daily routine. Journey was now wearing a black tank top and a pair of light blue pants. Being barely 1.52 meters, 5 foot, tall, Journey looked incredibly small and frail in comparison with the newcomer. Chapter 985 Struggle for Power Part 1. Once I would have been forced to wear a goddamn shirt with the risk of my sleeves getting grabbed. This thing Lith calls a sports bra is really useful. Journey appreciated her tank top while fixing her blonde hair into a small bun. The skin-tight combat gear emphasized her hourglass figure, making even her opponent swallow a few times. Journey's diminutive stature made her curves stand out, and her husband wished he could murder everyone in the room. You both know the rules. King Marone conjured the first blood array that would paralyze those within its premises the moment one of them bled. The victory belongs to the person who manages to injure the opponent first or pins them to the ground. Fight fairly, and remember that the honor of your households is at stake. Begin. Both contestants assumed a combat stance, but didn't move from their respective starting point. Journey was wary of Eierhain's long limbs and him of her counters. I'm sorry to meet you under such circumstances, Lady Ernest. I always respected both you and your husband. Ironhind said while shifting his body weight in several feints without taking a single step. Sweet words coming from someone who sided with our enemies. Journey, instead, remained still as the surface of a lake. No one ever got rich being nice. Ironhind shrugged, using the motion to hide the change of his stance that would otherwise signal his strategy. On paper, Journey was an easy mark. Shorter, lighter, older, and with slower reflexes than him. All Ironhind needed to do was to hit her once while making sure she wouldn't scratch him with her nails. He was aware of Journey's craftiness and how the rules of the challenge gave her an edge he couldn't afford to overlook. Ironhind focused on her shoulders to anticipate the movement of Journey's arms, and with it her footwork. A veteran like Journey would always prepare both her attack and defense before moving, something that Ironhind could use as a roadmap to victory. Yet she remained motionless while he charged forward, keeping her guard neutral as if she was focusing solely on the defense. Slow. Journey sidestepped the split second before his arms reached her own, using the momentum to spin faster and kick Ironhind's left calf with all of her strength. Unlike other kinds of kicks, hits on the calf instantly caused great amounts of damage and pain, making even a man as big as Ironhind stumble during his charge and sending him to slam against the barrier that separated the fighters from the spectators. Clumsy. While Ironhind was forced to use his hands to not hit the barrier head first, risking a nosebleed, and his left leg was still partially numb, Journey kicked his calf again in the exact same spot, forcing him to kneel. Unprepared, she struck at the back of Ironhind's head with a knife hand, severing his spine and leaving him paralyzed from the neck down. Ironhind fell onto the ground like a stringless puppet, screaming at the top of his lungs in fear. He felt no pain, but he was perfectly aware that unless a rejuvenator cured him, that kind of injury might require months of therapy to heal. Maybe no one ever got rich being nice, but you should have known that biting my husband's hand, and now mine, would have consequences. Journey ignored his screams and stood at the center of the array in defiance. Anyone else? She looked at her opponents in the eyes, making sure that they got the second part of her message that said, "If you come at me hiding behind the law, I'll use it to my advantage to crush you." Lord Ironhind, the fight isn't over unless you bleed or surrender. The queen replied to the man's plea for help the only way she could. His body was broken yet intact, and Journey had ceased her attack, leaving Ironhind only one way to end the duel. I yield. Now someone heals me. Seeing an adult man groveling in the dirt while crying in despair was a hard sight to behold. Journey left the array the moment it started to fade and brushed against Archmage Dyrus on her way to the changing room. Nuragor is done for. You're next. Her voice was a soft whisper in his ear, yet it would haunt his sleep for a long time. Village of Lucia, Solus's tower, a week after Lith had returned from Jambel. Solus achieving a deep cyan core had caused her tower form to grow bigger, larger, and had added 2 new floors instead of just one. The second underground floor, located directly below Litha's labs, contained what in the future would be his personal crystal mines. Being the closest floor to the energy flux coming from the mana geyser, the tower's basement was the perfect environment to grow crystal veins. The tower walls were naturally capable of condensing and focusing the world energy, which would allow the magical gemstones to grow at an accelerated rate. Unfortunately for Lith, it would still take over a century to grow something he could actually use. The realization disappointed him, but it also provided him with an unexpected and priceless source to boost his scarce resources. After studying how the artificial crystal mine worked, Lith had planted inside the walls the purple raw crystal he had taken from the orc shaman and all the weaker and smaller gemstones he had found during his travels. The mines had a small effect on already cut crystals, whereas raw ones would both keep growing as if they had never been mined and hasten the nucleation process of new crystals that would branch out those already formed. On top of that, unlike a natural mine, the floor was perfectly insulated from external energy sources, making it safe for Lith and Solus to practice their magic without the risk of unstable crystals exploding. Since the mana geyser was also required to keep the tower form and fuel Litha's experiments, Solus was able to regulate the flow of world energy according to their schedule. Whenever we are studying or resting, I can channel everything into the mine to accelerate the crystal's growth rate. But whenever we forge master something, or I'm not in the tower form, the process stops. Solus said while they were checking the development of old and new crystals. It's still better than anything I could hope for. Lith replied. A normal mine would require specialized workers, around-the-clock security, and be kept a secret to not have it seized by the kingdom. This way, instead, we've got our own portable mine. On top of that, its ability to refine all crystals we own has not to be underestimated. The Orc's crystal is so big and pure that, given time, it might easily become white. Also, not only does the mine allow us to further refine even already cut crystals, but also to recharge and enhance red, orange, and yellow gemstones that would otherwise be disposable. To not waste a single ounce of world energy, Lith had bought lots of yellow crystals and filled the tower walls with them. Yellow crystals were powerful but relatively cheap because they were the highest tier of crystals incapable of self-recharging. Lith hoped that using already formed gemstones as a foundation would help the mine to develop faster and provide him with valuable resources within an acceptable time frame. Chapter 986 Struggle for Power Part 2. After they were done checking the mines, Solus blinked them to the second floor of the tower to continue their work. Just like its underground twin, the new floor was as powerful as it was demanding. Lith and Solus called it the Heart, and they had spent quite some time deciding how to use the room to its fullest. The Heart was the tower's control panel for its arrays. Being part of Solus's innate abilities, both Lith and she could switch the magical formations on and off with a thought, giving them a powerful tool against whoever tried to attack them inside their home. The problem was that because of Solus's regression due to spending centuries without an owner, all the arrays Mina Dion had imprinted into the tower were gone. Moreover, the tower was far from being completely restored, which limited the number of arrays that could be stored inside the Heart. Activating a magical formation already imprinted required but a split second, whereas replacing one array with another more suitable with the task at hand required to cast it from scratch. Luckily, your ability to turn the tower invisible and to hide underground are not related to arrays, so we have all 4 slots open. Lith said, since arrays don't discriminate between friends or foes, we have to choose carefully. I'd set both Silverwing's hexagram and the darkness blocking arrays for defense. Agreed. Solus nodded as her skinwalker armor kept shape-shifting between her favorite day dresses. The hexagram is mana expensive, but it's the only array we have full control over, allowing us to hinder only our enemies. The only issue with it is that the hexagram requires our focus and will drain most of the energy from the mana geyser whenever we face a powerful opponent, making it impossible for us to warp or use it in combination with other arrays. As for the darkness blocking array, it will also block dimensional magic and protect us from chaos magic. If we meet again one of those monster abomination hybrids, we can't risk them destroying with a couple of spells the years of hard work we spent restoring the tower. That said, we can't win any battle just by defending, and running away from an enemy who discovered my real nature must be a last resort. We need arrays capable of attacking without turning us into a crisp. The Heart could even store impossible arrays, but none of those Lith knew were suitable for their purpose. The Mirror Hall already revealed all kinds of magical devices and formations better than any array could, while the Tower Warp made all mass transportation arrays obsolete. Will you stop that? You're giving me a headache. Lith grumbled as Solus changed her dress once again. You wear your skinwalker armor ever since you graduated from the academy, but this is my very first personal relic and one you made for me at that. I can only wear the armor while we are inside the tower, so can't you cut me some slack? Solus replied. Now that they were off duty, Lith and Solus spent a lot of time inside the tower, where she could take her physical form. No longer limited by time and space, Solus was developing her personality while experiencing what life had to offer her. Even the smallest things filled her with joy and wonder. Unfortunately, her naive enthusiasm annoyed Lith, who considered any delay on his timetable like a personal offense. The prolonged cohabitation and conflicting personalities made them bicker quite a lot. Look, I get that you're happy, but we still have to complete the Heart before being able to relax. Becoming an Archmage forced our non-awakened enemies to take one step back, but the Council doesn't care about fancy titles. Until our apprenticeship begins, we're just a rogue awakened who royally pissed off a lot of people by killing several potential heirs and causing their master's downfall. Lith snarled. Fine. Then since we lack any decent means of offense, we'll use the remaining 2 slots for the immortal body array and the air blocking array. The former will allow me to heal you and replenish your life force akin to invigoration even during battle, while the latter will prevent our enemies from flying in or out. Solus snarled back. Now that we're done, will you please calm down? I'm sick and tired of your grumbling. It's been years since we enjoyed such a long peace and were able to spend time with our friends. Lith sighed, making his favorite armchair appear behind him before plunging rather than sitting on it. You don't understand how serious this is. Lith pinched his nose and closed his eyes as he tried to keep the edge out of his voice. Our apprenticeship should have already started, which means that something went wrong. To make matters worse, Floria is about to awaken, and our studies about how to make someone who is this close to a blue mana core survive the process are inconclusive at best. I'm tired of watching my back all the time and being forced to wait for the damn moment when I can finally exchange notes with Faluel about every topic. Yet until the damn council stands in my way, I'll be stuck here in Lucia. There was no point in traveling around just to be forced to drop everything and come back the moment the Hydra contacted him. Stop worrying and think about the bright side. Solus embraced him, trying to cheer Lith up. During this time, we taught Tista a lot of things you practiced with your origin flames, and Naurand is teaching us the basics of light mastery. Lith groaned at her words. Now that he was unemployed, he had expected to have a lot of free time, whereas he had never been so busy. Teaching about advanced true magic to Tista and the 3 kings of the Tron Woods was a full-time job, while origin flames drained a lot of strength that not even invigoration could restore. Moreover, between taking care of the kids and helping protect her with the new house, Naurand could give Lith only the crumbs of his time. Last, but not least, his parents expected him to have lunch with them, while Camilla to find him home when she returned from work. Not having to worry about Lith risking his life on a daily basis and being able to spend time with him every day made her happier than she had ever been. Why are you groaning? We would have worked more only if you went into seclusion. We've studied the tower mines, discovering things that probably even Mina Dion ignored. We've reforged our skinwalker armor using our twin forge technique, strengthened your house's arrays. And I'm the one who teaches our disciples while you practice origin flames until you are forced to rest to not injure your life force. Don't get me started with all our runesmithing experiments, and I could go on for hours. Solus said. Fine, I stand corrected. Let's take a walk. I need your help picking something nice for Camilla's birthday. Lith got up from his chair and walked out of the tower. The building was now over 30 meters, 100 feet high. Yet it took it a second to shrink to the size of a marble before slipping on Lith's finger. Chapter 987 Boss Monster Part 1. That day, Lith and Solus were alone because Celia and his parents were out choosing the furniture for the Huntress' new house. Protector was on a mission for Faluel, and Camilla was helping Journey with a matter of the utmost importance that would keep her from returning home for a while. Lith was supposed to be happy since he could spend the day as he saw best, but he was actually incredibly bored. The reason for his bad mood wasn't his family, quite the contrary. It was the lack of company and distractions that forced him to admit that his magical knowledge had hit a wall that he couldn't overcome alone. Lith had already checked the tower's surroundings with the sentries and knew there wasn't anyone around. Instead of warping to his destination like usual, he could afford to take a stroll back home to calm his nerves. More than the council's meddling, it was the lack of a purpose that was eating at him from the inside. All of his lives he had always had a goal, something to strive for, whereas now he felt like he was stuck in a limbo. He reached his personal secret clearing in the Tron Woods and sat on a rock, letting the familiar scenery soothe his grumpy mood. This was our first training ground, back when we had no idea you could turn into a tower. Lith thought. Yeah, we have a lot of memories connected to this place. Here I explain to you the difference between true and fake magic. You fought Erda to the death. Tista learned how to swim in the river. 3-dimensional doors opened, cutting Solus short. You're a hard man to find, Lith Verhen. A stunning young woman said while her associates moved to Lith's sides, trapping him inside a triangle formation. She was about 1.76 meters, 5 feet 9 inches, tall, with wheat blonde hair and clear blue eyes. Everything in her figure from her fair skin to her curves bordered on perfection, reminding Lith of Tista. At a first glance, she seemed to be in her early 20s, but if she wasn't awakened, appearances were bound to be deceiving. The other two were handsome young men, both taller and bullier than Lith. Their perfect physique, coupled with the focused expression that Lith associated with a true mage silently weaving their spells, left little space for guesses. Either one of my human enemies recruits solely stern-looking top models as their goons, or these guys are awakened. Lith thought. Unless you're here to tell me that the council has given Faluel its consent to make me her apprentice, you'd better scram. I'm in a bad mood today, and 3 jackasses invading my turf make it even worse. Lith was happy for the distraction. He could use some human-shaped stress balls to vent out a bit. Solus, how tough are these guys? Despite his bloodlust, he kept a level head and checked his opponent's level before doing anything rash. Your intuition is right. They are all awakened. The woman has a deep blue core, while the men have a bright cyan mana core. Their physical strength is simply unbelievable. They are on par with Trias. Solus's thoughts were filled with shock and incredulity. She clearly had a hard time believing her own mystical senses. Lith inwardly cursed his bad luck and sprang into action. He remembered Trias all too well. The youth from the Blood Desert had merged with the Black Star, a living legacy that had bestowed upon him the physical prowess of a real dragon. Even if the 3 youths had mana cores weaker than his own, Lith knew he couldn't afford to underestimate them. In the past, he had defeated several opponents stronger than himself with teamwork or cunning, so there was no reason they couldn't do the same. To make matters worse, his enemies had not only the numerical advantage, but also access to insanely powerful relics that put them on Trias's level. How dare you threaten the emissaries of the sea? Scylla Jernoff froze in surprise, seeing Lith charging at her, and then sneered at his arrogance. She was the strongest mage in the group, while the other 2 had been sent to physically restrain Lith in the case he resisted his arrest. Scylla would have gladly done everything on her own, but not even awakening could overcome the natural gap in strength between men and women if they had the same level of body refinement. Don't worry, Solus. Even though we are outnumbered, we are not outmatched. We are both much stronger than back when we defeated Trias, and now we even have war on our side. Lith slammed his fists together, making Solus assume her arm protector form. It covered his right arm from the hand to the shoulder, with one of the deep cyan gemstones embedded on the back of his hand, while a green crystal rested on both his elbow and shoulder. A second stone glove covered his left hand and forearm, bearing the second cyan gemstone. The more Solus regained her strength, the bigger her physical form became, allowing her to turn into a more complex defensive artifact. War appeared in Lith's left hand with a burst of emerald flames, screeching its fury the moment the blood sheath that shrouded its senses shattered. The 3 awakened could feel a cold shiver running down their spines, yet they conquered their fear and activated all the mystical protections that their masters had bestowed upon them. Lith lunged forward, forcing Scylla to move right in front of his fist. The moment she blocks my right cross, I'll pivot on her guard to move behind her and use the momentum for. Lith's multi-layered attack plan crumbled when Scylla failed to move a muscle. His fist connected with her face, breaking her nose, jaw, and sending her flying outside the clearing like a living meteor. The awakened woman bounced against a few thick centuries-old trees before stopping. Lith was still trying to make sense of the events when the 2 other awakened unleashed several Tier 3 spells against him. Seriously? Lith asked Solus while he used War's World Mirror enchantment to redirect the incoming attacks so that the red-haired guy's spells would hit the brown-haired one and vice versa. I never said they were as strong as Trias after he fused with the Black Star. She laughed her ass off at his amazement. You added that part yourself. I just didn't bother to correct your mistake. The spells cut deep into the youth's enchanted armor, but they were too weak to deal lethal damage. The red-haired guy executed an overhead strike with an enchanted mace that broke into pieces when clashing against War. The angry blade shattered the weapon without losing speed and then cut through the youth's armor, almost severing his right arm from the shoulder. Why did you do that? Lith used the gushing blood to reform the scabbard and put War away. It made no sense to waste its power on weaklings. Because you always fight terrifying monsters. Seeing you wipe the floor with some regular guys, for once, is refreshing. It's also the perfect occasion to check how strong you have become compared to awakened with a master. Solus replied while playing in his head the boss theme of Ultimate Fantasy 77. Chapter 988 Boss Monster Part 2. Am I supposed to be the hero or the boss? Lith asked. Depends. Do you feel like a hero? Solus thought. Heck no. Then there's your answer. The brown-haired guy saw Lith unarmed and stored his weapon in his own dimensional item as well, believing that the rogue awakened was challenging him to a duel. Also, he didn't want to give Lith a reason to destroy his prized weapon. The youth performed a series of feints before hitting Lith with a left hook that carried all of his weight plus the strength from twisting his joints from the toes to the wrist. Lith ignored the feints and took the punch without moving. The impact made his head turn left, producing the sound of cracking bones and sinews. This is just sad. Lith checked the inside of his cheek for injuries, finding none. The awakened, instead, was whimpering in pain while holding his hand that was broken in multiple points. I'll mark that as like a boss on your personal file. Solus giggled. Aside from some minor enemies he faced during his journeys, Lith had become used to expect the worst from his opponents. Be them Urtu, the Talons, Nalier, or even Trias and the 6 awakened he had faced in Xantia, Lith always found himself against the cream of the crop. Opponents that outmatched him in experience, equipment, or who had been trained by the best masters Mogr had to offer. All of his previous enemies had been professional magical swordsmen, whereas now he faced people who were just average. They weren't ancient monsters like Thrud, nor fused with powerful artifacts like Trias or Akala. They lacked even the motivation of the 6 awakened that on top of training daily until they sweated blood, they had been willing to sacrifice part of their lifespan to achieve their master's legacy. Good gods, I sent Scylla and her suitors to fetch Verhen in the hope she would gain some valuable battle experience and maybe learn a bit of humility. I never expected that she wouldn't last a single hit. Now I understand why you two hold him in high regard. Jiza Jernov, Scylla's great-great-aunt and an elder in the Human Council said, while looking at her niece's embarrassing performance. Both Athung and Faluel, respectively the human and beast lord of the Distar Marquette, had a hard time not laughing out loud. Jiza was taking her fiasco with dignity. There was no reason to rub salt in her wounds. Well, Jiza, maybe you should have remembered how I obtained my position before throwing the poor Scylla in the dragon's maw. Athung Soranat was a woman in her mid-20s, about 1.75, 5 feet 9 inches, meters tall, with raven black hair that reached the small of her back. She was wearing a comfortable mage robe that Ragu had gifted her to celebrate achieving a territory at an age when most awakened were still apprentices. The heavily enchanted clothes were loose enough to not impede her movements, but could do very little to hide her soft curves. Just like Lith, she was a self-awakened who had a blue core and had still to learn about the hurdle necessary to overcome its boundaries. That's exactly the reason why I sent her. Jiza shook her head. Scylla is a bright and talented mage, but because of our blood tie, she never puts any effort in her training. I'm recording everything to both provide the council's elders with the evidence they need and to teach our youngsters a lesson. Gods, Verhen is right. This is just pathetic. We better move. Faluel blinked right on time to save the 2 awakens' lives. Lith had snapped their necks and windpipes to make sure they died slow enough to serve their purpose, but had no way to recover. Okay, princess. Tell me why you're here, and maybe I'll make this painless. Litha's words terrified Scylla as his hand clutching her throat and keeping her lifted from the ground tightened its grip. She didn't like either Orton or Kanto, but seeing their life force fading away was too much. They had tagged along to hit on her, or at least make a good impression on her aunt. She felt responsible for their demise. Let her go, Faluel said while restoring the 2 men before their mana cores started to fade. Why would I? Lith made Scylla's neck crackle like wood. They invaded my turf and threatened me. They're still alive only because I let them. No, this is my turf and you're my guest. Faluel's voice became stern. Letting Lith treat and speak to her as a peer while they were in the privacy of her lair was one thing, but doing the same in presence of witnesses was quite another. An apprentice who disrespected his master was a sign of weakness that neither of them could afford to show. I'm sorry, Master Faluel. Lith let the girl go abruptly, making her fall but first on the ground while he gave the Hydra a deep bow. Our turf and our guest, you mean? Athung appeared along with Jiza. Until the council takes a decision, Awakened Verhen is unaffiliated to any faction. Elder Jernov, Explanations are in order, if you please. After making sure that Scylla was all right, Jiza Jernov didn't deign her niece of a second glance. She focused all of her attention on the anomaly that the beasts and humans faction were fighting over, whereas the undead pressed for his elimination. Awaken Verhin, your several achievements and breaches of the Council's law have been brought to our attention. Jiza said, I've been tasked with taking you into custody and bringing you to the Council's headquarters for questioning. Are you willing to follow me, or do we need to waste more time with pointless fights? Solus. Lith thought. Bright violet core, a physical prowess that dwarves all Emperor beasts we've met who didn't weigh at least a ton, and she has more artifacts than decorations on a Christmas tree. She replied, Please, make way. Lith gave her a small bow. Jiza Jernov was a woman 583 years old, but due to awakening, she looked like she was barely in her early 40s. She was 1.62 meters, 5 feet 4 inches, tall with shoulder-length blonde hair, streaked brown all over, and light blue eyes. If not for her ample mage robe instead of the army uniform and her slightly older looks, she would remind Lith of Journey. Both of them showed emotions only if they decided so, and they were much more dangerous than their small builds would lead to believe. Not so fast. First, I have to assess your threat level. Please, remove all the cloaking devices in your possession along with any item you don't want to expose to my breathing technique. Feel free to remain naked. I doubt you have anything I haven't already seen in my long life. Jiza sounded polite and monotone like an answering machine. Lith kept his skinwalker armor on and stored everything else inside his pocket dimension. He doubted that it was anything new for an awakened Forge Master, and his paranoia didn't allow him to remain defenseless. What about my dimensional items? Solus couldn't be stored because she was a living being, and he couldn't risk Jiza discovering about her existence. Lord Athung and Lord Faluel are here to witness that everything goes according to protocol and to offer you assistance. Take your pick, and remember that every choice has consequences. Elder Jernov said. Chapter 989 Miracles and Madness Part 1. The moment Lith took Solus's ring off, his life force and mana flow returned to normal. A dimensional device capable of cloaking? Remarkable. Jiza nodded while walking around Lith. Her gaze made him feel like a purebred dog being examined for a competition. Let me guess, your life force has been damaged in some crazy experiment, but that didn't hinder your body refinement. You must have self-awakened for over 10 years now minimum, and you have a blue mana core, correct? Jiza had yet to even come close, but her estimates were all on point. How did you know? Lith almost expected her to discover his hybrid nature as well. Experience, child. I bet that right now you see me just as a big lump of energy. She replied as Lith entrusted his ring to Faluel. Now extend your hand and don't try anything funny. I like you already, but I will not hesitate to kill you if I need to. Jiza spoke with such a casual tone that it triggered Litha's survival instinct. Note to self, check if this woman is related to the Myrock household. Lith thought. Had you given the ring to Athung in the hope of garnering the Human Council's favors since you're already friends with the beasts, I would have been disappointed. Jiza explained as she used invigoration to study every nook and cranny of Litha's body. Only suck-ups pretend to ignore that no relationship can be built without mutual trust. We don't know you, and we have done nothing to deserve your loyalty. Your choice proves that you are grateful and respectful for the good received. That or you are a schemer son of a bitch. She took a long look at Lith, wondering which one of the options was more likely. You awakened very young, trained very hard, yet you didn't make any rookie mistake and lived right under our nose for years. Which means that despite your young age, you can't be underestimated. Put them on, please. A pair of metal handcuffs with a purple mana crystal the size of a nut on each bracelet appeared in her hands. Wait a minute, this is ODI magic. Lith recognized the enchantment the moment he examined the artifact with invigoration. Its design was modern, it used runes, and required much less magical power, but the pseudo-core was roughly the same. Kid, the Council existed before the 3 great countries were founded and will exist even after the Guardians will get bored with them and let them rot. If you get excited by a pair of handcuffs, you'll die of a heart attack when we arrive at our destination. Lith ignored her and looked straight at Faluel. Yes, it's really necessary. The Hydra said. They will lock onto your life force's signature and prevent you from channeling any form of magic. breathing techniques included. The council upgraded them nicely. Lith hesitated for a while, during which Jiza didn't so much as blink. The moment Lith wore them, an ugly feeling spread from his wrists and coursed through his entire body. He felt as if a huge burden had been placed on his shoulders, and he had to look at the world through tinted glasses. Only then did Jiza blink again and opened a warp steps leading to the council's headquarters. She pushed Lith, making him step through it first while she kept her hand on his back to control his every movement. The four awakened appeared in the middle of a courtroom with only a dock and a long rectangular table where 5 ancient beings that Lith assumed to be his judges sat. There was no space for the jury, but plenty of stands for spectators. Lith instinctively tried to use life vision, but nothing happened. Well, the good news is that these things deactivated death vision as well. The bad news is that this doesn't bode well. At all, he thought while recognizing some of those present. Off with the head. A voice that Lith had hoped to never hear again said, "Objection. This is not even a death penalty case." Faluel was flabbergasted by such outrageous demand, and so was everyone but the judges. Objection sustained. Ragu Dririan, the human representative of the council, was seconds away from destroying the physical form of Inxialat, the king of the liches and representative of the undead. "Stop interfering with your antics, Inxialat. This is a matter that concerns the entire council, not just 2 races." She looked like a woman in her late 50s, but she had lived for over 5 centuries. Her long black hair had partially turned into a silvery white color and was held up in a chignon. She had delicate features, but neither her expression or her voice had any warmth. Her eyes were burning with mana, looking at Inxialat in a way that closely reminded Lith of Manohar and the Queen. She was barely 1.6 meters, 5 feet 3 inches, tall, and had a frame thin enough that a casual onlooker would have been worried that a sudden gust of wind might blow her away. Yet from their previous encounter, Lith knew she had a vitality superior to that of Scarlet the Scorpicore and a bright violet mana core. If he dies, the session ends, correct? Which means I can go back home. Inxialat's logic was as flawless as it was insane. Inxialat Nagar looked like a sloppily mummified corpse, with barely enough tissues and muscles left to express how annoyed he was. He wore a tattered red silk robe with gold embroideries whose holes were masterfully patched by thick cobwebs. The spiders that were his tenants were pissed off from all that nonsense as well. Usually, a marble statue was a globetrotter compared to the Lich. No matter how much the undead press on the matter, Awakened Verhin is not going to die today. Ragu roared, and the rest of the council nodded. The undead want him to die? Inxialat was flabbergasted. Bunch of hypocrites. If they wanted to save me this hassle, they could have picked someone else as their representative. Only then did Ragu understand, and with her the rest of the council, that Inxialat had no idea nor care for what his faction wanted. He was there solely to represent himself. Many facepalms ensued on both the judges' stand and among the spectators. Only Ligain was laughing his ass off. And that's why so few among us awakened decide to turn into undead. Faluel was in her human form and was as lovely as always. With time and isolation, it's never a matter of if one becomes mad, only of when. Some people are born that way, Lith replied, finally understanding what was the weight that had burdened him ever since he wore the shackles. Every single person in the room possessed such a powerful mana flow that, even though they weren't even trying to harm Lith, it threatened to crush him now that his own aura had been suppressed. Now I understand why untrained people tend to be scared shitless by mages. I would probably have the same effect on people if not for Solus's help restraining my mana flow. On top of that, if not for Faluel shielding me, I wouldn't even be able to stand. Lith thought. The Hydra had remained close to him the whole time, wrapping Lith with her aura to ease the pressure he had to endure. Chapter 990 Miracles and Madness Part 2. From Faluel's pockets, Solus would have been drenched in a cold sweat if not for her total lack of glands. Her mana sense allowed Solus to realize what kind of monsters surrounded them, whereas Lith remained calm due to his blissful ignorance. Let's put it this way. The more you interfere with the trial, the more time we'll waste. Ligain said. The Guardian had the appearance of a lean albino man, 175 meters, 5 feet 9 inches, tall, with snow-white hair and skin. His eyes were purple and had a vertical pupil. The father of all dragons wore a full black war armor that only left exposed his face and hands. Multiple spots of his skin were halfway turned into scales, making Ligain look like he had tattoos. At those words, Inxialat sat straight and shut his mouth. The entire council admired once again the ability of the Guardian to perform miracles. Archmage Verhan, you've been brought in front of this tribunal to decide whether you'll be forbidden from having an awakened master and banned from the council, like the undead demand. Ligain looked at Inxialat, whose mouth was agape while mouthing a really, yet no sound came out. Or you'll finally become an integral member of our society. In the case the latter happens, we'll rule about who is more fit to fix your trouble-making character. You have piqued the interest of the beasts and the humans, so we'll give both parties the chance to present their arguments. First, we'll hear from the undead. Everyone turned toward Inxialat, who looked at them as if they were raving mad. It took him a few seconds to remember why he was there and rummage through his notes to find what he needed. Remember to water the plants, buy food for your pet. Nope, this is the grocery list. Inxialat said. Another damn council meeting. Today Raga looks hot as usual. I should make a move within the century. Nope, this is my diary. Everyone went pale at those words, Ragu included. Here it is. Dear fellow council members, the accused awakened Verhan has broken several of our customs during the years, and that was tolerable as long as he was just a rogue stranded among humans. Yet even after learning about our society, even after meeting several members of our kin, he never bothered learning our customs or worried about our endless struggle to keep fake mages from learning our secrets. During his short 20 years of age, he has shared the secret of awakening with more people than most of our century's old members do, putting both us and himself at the whims of fate. Awakened Verhan has also traded an orichalcum armor with fake mages, obtaining nothing for it but a fancy title and allowing them to come one step closer to true forge mastery. For those reasons, and because of how shady his past is, it's our conviction that he should be banned from our kin and left to fend for himself. Inxialat read the paper with a monotonous voice, without putting any effort to sound convincing. It was clear that someone had written the speech for him, yet it didn't make his arguments any less true. If the proposal passed, Lith would have been forced to go back to the kingdom or risk facing Dawn's wrath on his own. I can see from your file that you have awakened 4 magical beasts, your own sister, and that you plan on awakening more. Is it true? Lotho the Treant, the plant representative of the council asked. He looked like a giant oak tree come to life. Even while sitting, his treetop brushed the high ceiling of the courtroom, and squirrels could be seen running up and down his massive body. If not for his huge amber eyes and the massive tree trunks that Lith assumed were Lotho's limbs only because they came out of his body at the shoulder and hip level, the awakened was no different from a regular tree. Even if it is true, how is that a violation of the rules? Lith stood up, to not be forced to look up to his accusers. None of those I awakened shared our secrets, nor did they draw any attention to themselves. It doesn't matter how many people I awaken as long as I instruct them properly. The reason you're losing ground against fake mages is that they work together, whereas, despite your long lives, you have more factions than members. You should be grateful to me for bringing talented people into our fold. Well said. Inxialat gave him a standing ovation, clapping his bony hands and making the undead in the public wish they could kill him. How do you answer about the matter of the orichalcum armor? Phila the behemoth, the beast representative, sat back and steepled her fingers. Her original nature was that of an emperor beast, so her human form was shaped according to how she imagined herself to be. Phila looked like a woman in her late 30s, but she was actually 453 years old. Her waist-long chestnut hair had streaks of silver, black, and orange all over, forming a multicolored tress that reached the small of her back. She had had an oval face with delicate features, yet her bearing was that of a battle-hardened general. Phila was 1.9 meters, 6 feet 3 inches, tall, and had a muscular yet curvy figure that seasoned warriors and women alike envied her. It's true that the kingdom didn't fulfill their promise completely, but the Archmage title comes with many benefits, included the knowledge I needed to improve my skills. Lith couldn't tell them about war without putting Orion and the Urnas at risk. He knew that a few members of the council were helping his enemies from behind the scene, and Floria's family was his most powerful backer. More importantly, They were his loyal friends. Selling them to please a bunch of old farts he had never met was beyond outrageous to Lith. I simply assumed that being my crafting process extremely complicated, they would fail to learn anything from it. Moreover, this incident is more your fault than mine. If young and masterless awakened like me received from the council the means to further their research, even the basics, we wouldn't be forced to rely on fake mages. You dare criticize my choice, but if not for the kingdom and his mages, my talent would be still rotting in Lucia. Do you think that I've slain so many awakened due to dumb luck or miracle encounters? It was all thanks to my hard work and the good deals I made with fake mages. That's how I disposed of the previous human lord of the Distar region and his goons. Lith was referring to Garen Rogias, the over 300 years old awakened who had died at his hands, allowing a Thung to take both his territory and place in the council. Many murmurs followed Litha's words. Some reproached his hubris, most approved his results. Awakened Verhen is right. Jiza stood up from the defendant's stand. Like Faluel, she had never left his side, yet unlike her, Jiza wasn't doing anything to protect Lith from the ocean of mana that threatened to swallow his mind. I've seen him fighting, studied his armor, and witnessed the prowess of his equipment. His skinwalker armor is strong beyond his core. The blade he used is unlike any I've ever seen before, and he managed to craft a cloaking device that also serves as dimensional storage. Chapter 991 Questions and Answers Part 1. Even though Lith Verhen had no master, he achieved more than most of our apprentices. How many 20 years old awakened, you know, capable of killing an old fox like Garen? He belongs to the council. He just needs guidance. Jiza Jernoff's words surprised Lith and made him understand that she was actually his second defense counsel. Intriguing. Inxialat's eyes lit up as his greed overshadowed even the red light of undeath. To accept such a claim as proof, we have to first examine said equipment. Give his belongings to me. The king of liches extended his skeletal hand toward Faluel, who didn't budge. A mage's secrets are sacred. Lith made the armor and the rings himself, while the sword is my gift for his apprenticeship, she said, giving him a plausible excuse for war. Stealing both his and my workings isn't within the purview of this court. All in favor to extend our investigation for the greater good? Inxialat raised his hand, glad for the first time since he had been chosen as a representative to be part of the council. Yet only Lotho the Treant raised his hand along with him, making the lich swear in many languages, both modern and ancient. Raga didn't oppose Lith joining the beasts just to share the secrets of his magic with everyone else. She wanted to keep them for the human side of the council and mostly for herself. Phila was on Faluel's side, and even though she knew little about Lith, beasts looked after their own. As for Ligane, he was against the trial from the beginning. It was exactly because he didn't like to mess with other people's free will that he stayed out of the Empire's business. In his opinion, Lith was free to join any faction of his choosing. On top of that, he wanted to keep Solas's existence a secret. Ligane not only wanted Menadian's desperation to have all the happiness she could get, but also to observe how her bond with the anomaly affected his growth. So far, Lith was the only hybrid whose different natures harmonized instead of clashing against each other. The Guardian hoped that by studying Lith, he could find a cure for his daughter, Zorith. Motion denied. All in favor to move on the next item on our agenda, Raga said, and the council approved unanimously. Once again, the undead who spectated the trial cursed themselves for the lack of judgment of their representative. Very well. Awaken Verhen, welcome to the council. Phila beat Ragu to the punch and applauded him first, forcing the others to follow. Now the only matter at hand is determining who is more suited to nurture your talent and guide your first steps in our society. The behemoth then turned to Ragu. By what right do humans interfere with our fellow Awaken's life? Your own defense counsel has admitted that you provided Lith with nothing but threats. Phila pushed a button on her council amulet, making it replay the speech Jiza had earlier given Lith about loyalty. It's us beasts who offered him our friendship first, and then our guidance whenever Verhen needed it. The sword he carries is proof of our bond. He's an adult, responsible mage who has already made his choice. You should respect it. Ragu clenched her temples while staring at Jiza with such fury that if glares could kill, it wouldn't remain enough of her corpse to fit into a plate. Well played. Jiza ignored Ragu and gave Faluel a small bow. Always record everything when on official duty. Faluel returned the bow. I would respect his choice, if not for the damage your so-called friendship caused to this council. Despite the fact that Faluel had practically made him into her apprentice, he gave away the secret of orichalcum we guarded for centuries. On top of that, all of you can read from his own report that awakened Verhen met and let go a Razar, a member of the fabled Were people. A human master would have never given him such a long leash, nor neglected to explain the importance of the fringes to him. Your kin made us all lose ground with the fake mages, and also the opportunity to learn why only beasts can become awakened, or how in Mogur's name so few achieved a white core. Raga said, both matters hurt deeply the entirety of the council except for Ligain, who already had all the answers. Baba Yaga was one of his fiercest rivals in the fields of magical research and chess. Lith was surprised seeing the allegedly secret report he had given the army appear on Raga's amulet, who was sharing it with the others. I have no idea what they are talking about, but I guess fringes are way more important than I suspected. No one seems to be aware that Naurin lives with Protector. Faluel told me the truth. She really does respect other people's secrets. Lith thought. I strongly disagree. The Hydra stepped forward. You consider those actions mistakes because you look at them in hindsight, whereas I call them precious life experience. If we take our apprentices by hand and make all difficult decisions for them, then how can they ever become responsible? The armor is a negligible loss. Given how quickly fake mages uncovered its secret, it was only a matter of time before they discovered it on their own or by capturing one of our criminals. From the failed trade, Lith learned the importance of bonds and how untrustworthy human politics are. That's why he has come to me. As for the Razar, I ask you to remember the history of Were people. It's because of monstrosities like those the ODI or the forbidden magic users committed that beasts and plants have learned how to take their own lives rather than allow themselves to be captured. Had Lith taken the Razar by force, how could we get anything out of him except through violence? Even if we did, the only possible outcome would be either the Razar committing suicide or Mogur punishing us for our transgression. Forcing our way into Mogur's consciousness is dangerous at best and suicidal at worst. This way, instead, there's a chance that he'll return and open up to us willingly. Faluel stepped back, leaving the members of the council and the judges to discuss her argument. Murmurs filled the room as everyone wanted to speak their mind, even guests and spectators. Among them, Xenogrash pondered those ideas, thinking about how to guide young abominations as the Awakened did. She had been invited to discuss the council's terms for allowing the hybrid Eldritchs to join. Xenogrash had chosen that date specifically because she was curious to witness how council's justice worked and meet Lith in person. She had heard about him from the Master many times, and when she had learned from her liaison with the council that he was an Awakened, she decided to take two birds with one visit. You make some valid points, Faluel, but what ifs have no place in history books? Only facts matter. Lotho the Trant said, Varen's actions maybe helped his growth, but hindered us all nonetheless. Moreover, I read this report and many others while preparing for this trial. Razar or not, human host instead of undead or not, I would like to understand how Verhen survived his meeting with Dawn. Chapter 992 Questions and Answers Part 2. In the past, it took many of us just to drive Dawn away and a fringe to contain her, yet Verhen stands here before us, unscathed. On top of that, I can't find a reasonable explanation for how he destroyed the Black Star or defeated the last remnants of the forever accursed ODI. The simple word filled the Treant with so much hatred that his foliage turned red. Awakened Verhen accomplished the very same things that usually require either an army or a guardian to do. The presence of allies, be they human or Were people, isn't enough to explain any of this. In order to determine which faction is more suited to handle our new asset, we must first understand his true nature. Otherwise, we might groom a threat that would take several precious lives to put down. Lotho expressed the worries that all factions actually harbored. Humans and beasts had no rush to answer those questions only because they were certain that they would learn Lith's secrets in due time. The master-apprentice relationship would allow his mentor and their allies to harness such knowledge to their advantage. Lith sighed in relief when none of the undead mentioned Solus. The plant's representative seemed to be his only real opponent, since Inksealot was more worried about the time he spent away from his lab than about Litha's destiny. I don't think that it would be wise talking about my world tribulations. I noticed the grimaces all members of the council did when Raga mentioned their inability to become guardians or to achieve the so-called white core. Also, based on the interest they shown even for my skinwalker armor, I bet that, if they knew that I possessed Manadian's legacy, and with it the ability to tap into Mana Geyser, this trial's topic would turn from who takes care of Lith to I call dibs on the Mage Tower in the blink of an eye. He thought. To quote one of my esteemed professors, just because an idiot can't do it, it doesn't mean that something is impossible. Lith repeated the accursed Manohar's words, making many stomachs churn. Without their precious mana reactor, the ODI were barely a threat. Their inability to use magic above Tier 3 and their conceitedness allowed me to resist long enough for Quilla Urnas to destroy the reactor. It took just a handful of humans and a single awakened to exterminate them. Ask him if you don't believe me. Lith pointed at Ligane, who he recognized only thanks to Faluel's instructions. The Black Dragon witnessed everything. Is it true? The other 4 judges asked in unison after turning toward Ligane. Yes. I had been summoned to intervene in the case Awakened Verhen failed. The Guardian snorted in annoyance. He didn't like to be manipulated. What about Dawn? Lotho said. She's not the kind of opponent that leaves openings, and you had no allies. There's no way a human could escape from her clutches. That's true, Faluel replied, stepping forward again. A human couldn't, but one of us could. She waved at Ragu, Fila, and then to Xenogrosh, conjuring the only thing that could make a room filled with semi-immortal beings shut up. Curiosity. Lith, show this court why you belong among us beasts, if you please. Hearing his cue, Lith shape-shifted into his hybrid form, starting from his hands. The mystical handcuffs restricting him became useless, and he easily shattered them open by using fusion magic. Razor-sharp claws replaced Litha's nails, and talons grew on his toes and heel, making his feet resemble those of a bird of prey. New limbs came out of his back, with a short tail full of bone spikes growing out of his spine, as well as a set of black membranous wings that erupted from his shoulder blades. They stretched wide, covering the spectator's field of view for a second before starting to flap and bring him to the eye level of the judges despite the hunched position that flying without magic required. The wings were twisted and unnatural, like the hands of a giant swatting the air below him. Litha's face was now a black slate, apparently without a mouth or nose. 2 small, curved horns came out of his temples while his 3 eyes looked at those present. The silence turned into an uproar as everyone stood up to take a better look at the unknown creature in front of them, even Ligane. He exploited the ensuing chaos to study with soul vision both hybrids in the room. To his eye technique, Solus was a short young woman wearing a golden Roman toga and sandals. It was an attire outdated for centuries that Ligane recognized as the clothes that Manadian's apprentices used in the privacy of their own rooms. Her figure was wrapped in 2 kinds of chains. One was big, thick, and made of life. It connected her to Lith through their respective mana cores, hearts, and minds. The second kind of chains was gray and thin, yet they weighed Solus down, forcing her to kneel. Of the 6 original gray chains, 4 were broken and were slowly fading away. 2 more remained and sucked her vigor, keeping her from achieving her true potential. The energy coming from the first chain was amplified by her body and was slowly eroding the gray fetters. As for Lith, to soul vision he appeared to have grown bigger than ever, with 2 sets of wings instead of just 1, and with all 7 eyes opened, each one of a different color. This is impossible. Shape-shifting is just a branch of light magic, and the shackles are supposed to negate all kinds of spells. Jiza explained. Raga was trying to make sense of what her eyes showed her. Verhen is a human. I checked it myself. His life force is cracked, but that's it. I even performed blood resonance on his parents to confirm his bloodline, and I can swear upon my name that they are both human as well. Jiza replied, refusing to believe she could have made such a huge blunder. Blood resonance was a discipline created by Headmaster Duke Marth that was the magical equivalent of a paternity test. Nobles used it to make sure their spouses had not been unfaithful or to expose the existence of bastard sons, whereas mages used them to trace hereditary diseases and awaken to identify their descendants. Using the creation of a fake mage was embarrassing, but Awakened always put practicality above something as insignificant as pride. How did you escape from Dawn? Faluel asked. Lith opened the scales covering his mouth and released a small burst of blue origin flames, doubling the uproar. Everyone turned towards Li Gain, demanding an answer from him. I'm not the father. Thanks for asking, he said while blushing a little in embarrassment. No one believed him, not even Xenogrash. What the heck has Dad done this time? I remember this smell. It's the mix of human, beast, and eldritch abomination scent I found on the scene of Jarek's death. It's no surprise that a simple rockworm and an empowered abomination were no match for my lil bro. The master was right all along in wanting to bring Lith into our fold. He might be the key to the perfect abomination hybrid. The more her draconic sense of smell confirmed her hypothesis, the more Xenogrash felt hope grow in her heart. Chapter 993 Dragon Bloodline Part 1. Phila the behemoth glared at Faluel in reproach as she sniffed the air like a hunting dog on the prowl, confirming Litha's hybrid nature. Curse you, damn Hydra. Creatures like phoenixes and dragons don't even bother joining the council, whereas their lesser cousins seek us only for the secret of awakening. A wormling with origin flames is the best apprentice a Forge Master could ever want. Now it's too late to change my motion and request to be the one appointed as Varen's mentor. I can only give him to Faluel or Ragu. You tied my hands, you seven-headed deceptive snake. Phila thought. Ragu looked at Lith with even more greed, daydreaming about all the wonders that human Forge Masters could achieve once freed from the necessity of resorting to beasts to purify metals. Lith is the first human capable of harnessing origin flames. If his bloodline shares this trait, his descendants would be a priceless asset. We must keep him from falling in the hands of the beasts or nothing will change. Raga thought. This hybrid could bridge between the council and the abominations, if not even bring humans and beasts closer. I must tread with caution and make sure my people don't get swallowed by the shift in the power balance that this revelation might create. Lotho the Treant thought. I always wondered how a meal cooked with origin flames would taste. Too bad they are too expensive to waste them like that. Now that I think about it, did I turn the fire below the cauldron off before I left home? Ixiolot thought. He had long since hoarded everything he needed for his research and had no care for what other undead might want. The King of Liches just wanted to go home. After the 5 judges forced everyone to stay calm, they took turns in scanning Litha's second life force. If before it was just a squabble between 2 factions, now the result would affect them all. I owe you an apology, Jiza. I have never seen anything like this, and the 2 life forces eclipse each other to the point that it's impossible to notice the second unless you know what to look for. Raga said. He's a wormling, yet he is not. Phila mumbled. Usually, at his age, the 2 life forces of a hybrid clash violently against each other because they are incapable of coexisting. It's the reason why by the time a hybrid's mana core reaches full maturity at 20 years of age, it can't cope with the conflict anymore, and the hybrid is forced to pick one life force. In Varen's case, however, the 2 life forces are like light and darkness, 2 sides of the same coin. I believe that in due time, they'll become one. Maybe we should ask our guest what she thinks. Lotho pointed at Xenogrash. After all, he's part abomination. Why not let them take care of him? All the members of the organization are hybrids, so they are best suited to teach him. Knowing that it was too late to lay claims to the young man on the plant's behalf, all he could do was damage control. The abominations were few in numbers even for awakened standards and had already access to origin flames. If Lith fell into their hands, the shift in the power balance would be negligible. Moreover, it would make the war between undead and abomination escalate even further. Plants considered both races as parasites and only wished them to become extinct. No way. Abominations aren't part of the council, and I'll not give them an awakened to experiment upon. Phila and Raga said in unison. Both their factions had resorted to inviting the organization into their fold only out of desperation. Without a ruler of the flames, the gap between true and fake Forge Masters became smaller by the decade, and with Dawn's return, the 3 horsemen were reunited again. Each one of them could awaken their host without fail and provide their spawns with uncanny abilities. Bytra and Xenogrosh together would solve the former issue, while the unique powers the monster Eldritch hybrids held would force the horsemen on the defense. Yet if the abominations discovered how to awaken again and became able to produce an offspring, they would become Mogur's master race. Ragu and Fila regarded them as a necessary evil, but an evil nonetheless. Thanks for your trust. I'll make sure to convey it to the rest of my kin. Xenogrosh sneered. I'm not going to take part in your power play, but I will not stand idly if you try to harm my little brother. A small burst of purple origin flames came out of her mouth, while a single gold coin appeared amid emerald flames between her middle and index finger. I beg your pardon. Lith had been careful and followed Faluel's plan down to a T, yet the sudden turn of events couldn't be underestimated. What do you mean, little brother? And how did you bypass the dimensional ceiling array of this place? He would have liked to ask many more questions and discuss with Solus the findings of her mana sense. But he was afraid that among those old monsters, there was someone capable of spotting their mana link if triggered from a distance. How dare you threaten the council, fallen lord? Lotho stood up, forcing the magical ceiling of the courtroom to grow higher to accommodate the wooden titan. Do you think that just because you possess an Omni Pocket you're a match for us? Conjure your best weapons, parasite, and we'll gladly put you down and retrieve them from your corpse, just like you stole them from your countless victims. Lith had no idea how strong Xenogrosh was. To Life Vision, her black core and her troll core canceled each other in a foggy mess, whereas Lotho was brimming with so much power that he appeared as a small mana geyser. I gave her the Omni Pocket as a coming-of-age gift. Ligane's voice was quiet, yet it eclipsed everyone else's, making the room fall silent. An odd feeling of cold spread among the awakened, as if a winter storm had walked through the door, finding them stark naked. What did you say? Lotho turned toward the still-sitting guardian, whose mantle turned out to be his folded wings. You heard me. She didn't steal the pocket. Ligane stood up, and everyone else suddenly felt smaller. The only thing worse than discovering Xenogrosh's origin was facing her father's wrath. How dare you threaten my daughter in my own house, after I promised her hospitality rights to settle her business with the council? Ligane flapped his wings, forcing everyone on their knees due to the air pressure that the gesture caused. Only Xenogrosh was allowed to stand and lift with her because she was shielding him with her own wings. This isn't your home. Raga managed to stand, but barely. This is the council's headquarters. Oh no. This is the Empire, and everything else is an insignificant detail on the map, waiting to be rewritten. A simple glare forced her to fall down again, while Lotho had now shrunk to the size of a child. If you want to fight the abominations as I asked you all years ago, be my guest. If you insist on bringing them to the council, I'll get over it. Yet threaten one of my guests again, and we'll see how many are willing to face me to indulge in your madness. Ligane snarled, and the strength in his voice made the weakest in the room faint. Chapter 994 Dragon Bloodline Part 2. All members of the council had become too used to the father of all dragons' aloof attitude and treated him as a peer. Ligane wasn't as overbearing as Salark, nor passionate as Tyrus. So many considered him an eccentric old man. However, Ligane wasn't old so much as ancient, and he was no man at all. I apologize on behalf of the undead faction, and I give you my word that your daughter will suffer no harm from us until our next encounter. Inxialot said while taking a good look at his own shoes. I may be crazy, but I'm not stupid. I'm not going to put everything I worked hard for at stake for that dumb tree. He thought. The horsemen act cocky in front of the guardians because their mommy has their backs, but for anyone else facing Ligane, without a rock-solid plan is plain suicide. After the vow, the undead were allowed to stand. One after the other, the representatives of the different factions repeated Inxialot's oath, returning the room to normality. All dragons come from the same bloodline, so I don't care about who sired you. You're my little brother. Xenogrosh said the moment she was certain that no one would interrupt her again. As for the array, it's a simple trick, but it requires both an Omni Pocket and an ability akin to Origin Flames. I would like to tell you more, but Dad might kill me if I reveal more in front of so many Forge Masters. The gold coin disappeared, and what looked like a business card had taken its place. One side had a communication rune engraved on it, while the other was blank. If you ever find an Omni pocket or you just need to talk, apply my rune on your amulet and your rune on the card. The revelation that Mina Dion had managed to reproduce Ligane's craft and the raw power Lith felt from Xenogrosh while she was protecting him shocked Lith. Yet he forced himself to focus on the newly acquired information. The abomination told me even less than Zedros did a while ago, but her words weren't a riddle, and more importantly, I saw her using a pocket. I think. Enough of your nonsense, Lotho. You already made us waste too much time. Ragu's words snapped Lith out of his reverie and earned her applause from Inxialat. This is a matter between only the beasts and the humans, yet its resolution can only be determined through the Council's ruling. We need to determine which one of us is better suited to nurture Varen's talent. Indeed. Fila nodded. The only things the Council respects are wisdom and power. You claim that Awakened Varen has demonstrated poor judgment and that we failed at protecting the interests of our community. Yet what makes you think you can do a better job? Not only has he survived unspeakable horrors, but he has also already defeated the best disciples of some of the most powerful members of your faction. In battle, bronze without brains are useless. The fact itself that Verhen is alive proves you wrong. I can find someone who will teach him how to master origin flames, even forcing them if I have to. What can you humans do for him? Personal opinions and ideals had no place in the awakened society. They were all too powerful and long-lived to let things like prejudice drive them on crusades to force their way of living onto others. They firmly believed that power without wisdom was just violence, while wisdom without power was just hot air. Both of them reached their true potential in the practice of magic on the battlefield. Idiots who relied on raw power were doomed to fall for the simplest tricks and die, whereas sages with weak bodies would perish the moment something messed up with their plans. You know as well as I do that, unlike humans, beasts rely heavily on their physical abilities. Raga said, the body you're now using is just a suit for you, something to discard the moment things get out of hand, whereas humans have no choice but to fight with what they have. Just like you, Faluel needs her true form to demonstrate her full battle prowess, and as you all saw, Lith is no beast. He's some kind of wormling, and his base is still human. My faction can offer him martial arts suitable for his body, spells that can allow him to exploit his small size against bigger opponents, and teach him all that allowed us to be a match for your kin. He was born a human and needs to reason like a human to survive. Aside from magic, you have nothing to teach him. That's a fair point, but I think it's not enough. Awakened Verhan has survived this far against opponents of all kinds and sizes. He's smart enough to learn such tricks on his own. Fila said. Both Awakened rested their case and waited for the Council's resolution. They were both involved parties, so they couldn't take part in the vote. I doubt that any further debate will make either of you withdraw your claims, correct? Ligane asked, obtaining nods as replies. Then the solution is simple. The beasts claim that they are entitled to take care of Awakened Verhen because they nurtured his talents so far, while the humans claim beasts did a poor job and that they would do better. My proposal is to put to test the opening statements. To do that, we'll choose an opponent suitable for Awakened Verhen and have them fight in a controlled environment. If he triumphs, then the beasts are right in saying that, between his natural talents and their teachings, he will receive all the care he needs. If he fails, then the humans are right and will claim their prize. All in favor. Ligane raised his hand while looking around. Lotho and Inxialat agreed to the proposal. The Treant trusted the father of all dragons' wisdom above all but the world tree, whereas the Lich just wanted to go home. How did it go? Lith asked while Fila and Ragu joined the rest of the council to define the details of the task. Pretty good. Faluel returned Solus's ring to him. By revealing your hybrid nature in front of the council, you have achieved much with no risks. You've given the beasts a reason to watch over you. You are not just a human I'm taking as an apprentice on a whim anymore. You're one of us. On top of that, the beasts will do their best to protect their monopoly over origin flames. As for the humans, they now see you not only as a suitable heir for one of their legacies, but also as a valuable asset. If you learn the secrets of the origin flames, the ability to purify metals is precious by itself, but since you're also a forge master, you have the potential to become a ruler of the flames. Awakened don't care about what race they belong, They are only interested in having someone on their side that will increase the gap between true and fake mages. They wouldn't seek help from the abomination that once was the fourth ruler otherwise. Last, but not least, you no longer need to hide in the awakened society. Even if someone were to discover your secret, now they can't blackmail you. Faluel was clearly hinting at Zedros the Wyvern, of which she was becoming suspicious. Chapter 995, Peerless Predator Part 1. Thanks for everything you did for me, Faluel. Lith shook her hand. The Hydra had accurately predicted how the trial would unfold, making her plan work like a charm. At least until that moment. Don't thank me yet. I've got no idea what they'll put you against, and if you fail, all of this will be for nothing. Humans are stricter than beasts, and after revealing your abilities, you need the council more than ever. Whatever happens, accept the results of the trial. She said. She's right. Jiza had never left Litha's side, making sure that no one exploited the chaos of the debate to try something funny. If you fail and then refuse to acknowledge Ragu as your master, your life will become a nightmare the moment you step out of that door. Revealing your true hybrid nature was a double-edged sword. Now that everyone knows how precious you are, they'll spare no dirty moves to force you to submit if you go back to being a rogue awakened. That said, I know that awakened humans have given you more trouble than help during your journey, but I hope you don't resent us all for that. Beasts are no better than humans. You'll find as many bad people among their ranks as among our own. The only reason why you faced mostly awakened human criminals is that you lived in human society. Awakened are tightly bound to their race of origin. We live among our kin and task our descendants with taking care of business, whereas beasts mostly work as mercenaries and hate being forced to hide their nature. Even if you succeed in your trial, once you are done with your apprenticeship, you'll keep meeting more humans than beasts as long as you reside inside cities. Don't burn bridges that you may need later. Lith gave her a small bow, and then spent the time before the test talking with Solus. Glad to have you back. I need all the help I can get to not let our plans get screwed up in case Ragu doesn't agree with awakening Floria. He thought. The monster abomination's words were interesting, but there's something you need to know. Aside from young people like you and a thong, every one of those present has either a bright blue core or a bright purple core. Solus said. Meaning? Don't you find it odd that even old-looking awakened have a bright blue core? I mean, sure, you awakened from birth and had an easier time adapting your body to the mana core's growth. But how can it take people centuries to reach the stage right above yours? It doesn't make sense, especially considering that all awakened we met had either a cyan or a blue core. Unless, Solus said, unless getting a purple core requires to meet some hidden conditions. Lith completed the phrase for her. Doesn't this also mean that fake mages are potentially even stronger mages than awakened? People like Manohar naturally grow with a purple core, whereas awakened are capped to blue unless they find a way to overcome their limits. If we're right, then the cap plus the fact that even Faluel can't awaken people with a bright blue core like Quilla limits the awakened's progress with magic. Whatever is needed to get a violet core, I don't think it can be taught. Solus said. There are way fewer purple cores than I expected. Moreover, based on what Faluel told us, awakened without a magical bloodline always have a master, so there's no way they wouldn't pass down the technique in the case something happens to them. Everything is set. Please, follow us. Ligane opened several warp gates at once, allowing all those present to reach what looked like an underground arena. The place reminded Lith of the Colosseum, and to Xenogrash of the amphitheater, where Baitra had come to terms with her pasts. The rules are simple. Once you reach the battlefield, the arrays will seal the space around you and your opponent will arrive. Dimensional magic works inside the arena, so you can retrieve and use all of your equipment. After all, your sword is a gift from Faluel, and some of your creations are certainly derived from the help she gave you. The Council allows their use because they are proof of what beasts have done for you. If you fail despite that, they can only blame themselves. Don't worry about death. We'll let you fight until your last breath, but the moment your opponent is about to deal you a lethal blow, I'll personally stop him and declare your defeat. You have 1 minute to prepare your spells. Starting from now. Lith took all of his equipment out of his pocket dimension and started to weave his spells. The good news is that I can go all out. Origin flames, war, my special rings, everything goes. Lith thought. What about the bad news? Solus asked. For once, no bad news. Do you think I should pull off a Silverwing's hexagram, like against the vampire and other? 1 minute isn't enough for me alone to do it. But there are two of us, and I don't care pretending I'm a genius warden. My life is safe. But what about you, Floria, Camilla, and the others? Raga might forbid me to visit them or restrict my actions as long as I'm her apprentice. Also, I'm not going to let Velandyrus have his way with the Urnus. It's worth a shot. Solus telepathically nodded. Faluel knew about her existence and was willing to take Solus as her apprentice, whereas they couldn't afford the risk to check if Ragu was as open-minded as the Hydra. Solus's future rested on the outcome of that battle as well. Ligane was nice enough to give them more than just 1 minute. He assumed that Lith and Solus could use a bit of time to calm down and strategize. Begin. His voice created a golden, translucent dome that enclosed the arena and warped Lith's opponent on the opposite side of the battlefield. Oh shit. Lith had never seen something that big. To be precise, he had never seen the creature that was standing in front of him, not even in books. The beast looked like a lion, but it had a brown body and a deep green mane. Its height at the withers reached 7 meters, 23 feet, and its violet eyes shone with intelligence. Unbeknownst to Lith, the creature was a Minios, a monster as rare and hard to kill as a Grendel. Its species was almost extinct due to how dangerous they were. The only few remaining specimens left could be found only in the most isolated places of Mogar or in Ligane's biomes. I guess they took Raga's words into account while choosing our opponent. Solus thought. Most creatures this size we faced were our friends rather than enemies. Lith activated Silverwing's hexagram, making sure to encompass both himself and the Minios. He kept his breathing steady and was ready to counter any spell the beast could throw at him. At the sight of the array, the lips of the creature curled up in what looked awfully like a smile. Then, it charged forward as fast as a lightning bolt, taking Lith and Solus by surprise. Chapter 996, Peerless Predator Part 2. Fuck me sideways. My initial assumptions were wrong. A monster this big only needs one step to close in and one strike to kill me. It has no reason to waste time with magic. Lith thought. It's worse than that. It can use fusion magic, and there's no telling how much it boosts the enemy's physical prowess. We never faced such a creature before, so I have no idea how big is the gap between you two. Solus said. Lith instantly dispelled the useless array that drained his focus and jumped back while activating his Tier 5 magic holding ring. The final sunset spell it unleashed was focused into a powerful beam of black flames that struck the Minios like a truck and propelled Lith backward, boosting his dodge speed. He managed to avoid the change and put some distance between them again, yet all the damage dealt by a fully charged final sunset barely amounted to a burn mark on the creature's muzzle. To make matters worse, the injury started to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye the moment the spell exhausted its mana. What the actual fuck? Final Sunset is comprised of fire and darkness magic that Mogar itself referred to as the elements of destruction. Not even golems are that tough. Solus, is it really a living being? Lith asked. For alive, it's alive. She replied. Its mana core is really odd, but that's hardly a novelty with monsters. It's similar to that of trolls since I can sense an imbalance in the darkness element, but there's something different. Try changing approach. By the time Solus finished speaking, the Minios was already in front of Lith, trying to bite his head off. Lith managed to catch the maw with his hands and activated his gravity field ring. The creature was too big for the gravity sheath to affect its whole body, but the ring still managed to make the Minios light enough so that Lith could exploit the momentum of its charge to execute an overhead throw. At the same time, he unleashed all the spells he had at the ready down the monster's throat. This is supposed to be a test of wisdom, not a slugfest. Lith thought. Maybe the creature's skin is nigh invulnerable, whereas its internal organs are frail. The fire scorched the soft tissues and made the air so hot to be unbreathable, while streams of electricity coursed through the monster's bloodstream, reaching all of its internal organs at once. Remarkable nerve, Phila said from the stands. Usually when facing something that big, people are too shocked to think clearly. Makes you wonder what kind of horrors he's used to facing. Why didn't you mention any of this in your request for an apprentice, Faluel? Because I hate having competition. The Hydra replied with a smile. Good move. This time it took some solid damage. Even though the opponent seemed to be down, Solus kept collecting data to understand the real nature of their trial. Its life force plummeted after taking those spells. Maybe this thing is really capable of absorbing the darkness element like a troll. Fire and lightning seemed to be drop it. The Minios had managed to twist its body so that its hind legs hit the ground first. Its claws dug deep into the pavement, allowing it to have a strong foothold and throw Lith away like a ragdoll. The speed and might of the head alone sent Lith flying, even though he had released his hold before the Minios could complete the motion. The creature resumed the chase without a second of delay and attempted a second bite while its prey was spinning in midair. So much for the weakened life force. Lith spread his wings, using air magic to gain a speed superior to that of his enemy. This dome is too small. I can't get vertical distance, and that thing runs like a train. The life force was indeed weakened. The problem is that it recovered so fast that I almost failed to warn you in time. Solus said, "That makes no sense." Lith hurled a stream of blue origin flames that struck the Minios' head and turned it into a ball of fire. Yet the flames disappeared as if they were just a bucket of water and dealt about the same damage. The Minios kept chasing Lith, who could only fly around while breathing one burst of origin flames after the other. "Stop that. You're only harming yourself." Neither the mana core nor the life force of the creature has taken any damage. I know it sounds impossible, but it's true. Solus's brain spun at top gear, yet the answer kept eluding her. Lith unsheathed war, hoping that the cold adamant would succeed where all kinds of magic at his disposal had failed him. The angry blade screeched its challenge, making the Minios falter for the first time since its appearance. Yet the creature's hesitation didn't last long. The giant lion slashed horizontally with its claws, forcing Lith back on the ground. He couldn't go up due to the golden ceiling nor stay in midair due to the creature's pincer maneuver. Dumb move. Lith used earth magic to make the pavement under the Minios' hind legs sink and throw it off balance since the forelegs were still hitting where he had been a second ago. The creature fumbled, allowing Lith to slash deep into its defenseless paws and draw the first blood. He then used gravity magic to turn the fall into a crash. The sudden acceleration made the Minios' head plunge on top of the blade that Lith had planted in the ground, with its tip pointing upwards. War pierced through the jaw and reached the brain, yet Lith could see with life vision that not even that kind of wound seemed to affect the creature's vitality. He flew back without retrieving his blade, in hope that it would buy him enough time to solve the riddle and beat the test. Magic doesn't work, and neither does physical attacks. The cuts War inflicted on our enemy healed a second after being opened. What are we doing wrong? He thought. I could feel War's world mirror ability activating. Solus said, "The skin of that beast must be infused with some elements that make it impossible to harm it with conventional means, just like a golem. The problem is that as soon as War's jamming effect fades, the wounds close. Let me get this straight. Imbalanced like a troll, shielded like a golem, and heals like a ghoul, since no matter the damage it takes, it doesn't need nutrients. What the fuck is that thing, and how are we supposed to beat it?" Lith asked. "Maybe we are about to find out." Solus shushed Lith to make him focus. The fact that the wounds healed didn't mean that the Minios didn't feel pain or that the brain damage didn't impair his movements. The creature had clawed off its own skin in the attempt to take War out of the jaw. Unluckily for the giant lion, he had just succeeded. The hilt of the blade was now stuck in the space between two claws, triggering the unwanted ability Orion had warned Lith about, and that he had experimented on an unwise thief in the past. Chapter 997 Treasure from the Past Past 1. Orion himself had no idea how War would react if the wrong person picked it up, but as its maker, he could feel how dangerous the enchantment was. What really troubled Lord Ernest, however, was the fact that he had never planned for such safeguard. There was no trace of it in either his notes or blueprints. Yet when he checked the final result of his labors with his royal forge master, Juan, the extra pseudo-core was there nonetheless. Right after receiving War, Lith needed a guinea pig to understand what kind of threat the blade represented for his family, and if it could be used as a means of interrogation. One day, Lith took all the insignia of his status off, wore civilian clothes, and took a stroll in the slums of Xantia with the priceless blade hung to his hip. It took him less than 100 steps to be surrounded by armed bandits. "Give us the blade, empty your pockets, and no one gets hurt," a rough man in his mid-30s said. He had blonde hair and a stubble, both as dirty as his clothes. His mouth missed a few teeth, giving the man more a desperate look than a threatening one, yet he handled his knife like a professional. "Catch." Lith turned his pockets inside out to show that they were empty and threw the blade in a slow lob. The thug took the blade from the hilt while it was still in midair, and War didn't take the change of ownership well. The hoodlum suffered the same fate that now was befalling the giant lion. Just like when Lith had first imprinted it, spikes erupted from the hilt and dug through the flesh before turning into hooks, making it impossible to remove them without amputating the limb. Then, War unleashed all of his enchantments right inside the usurper's body, bypassing all kinds of protections they could wear. Through something that Lith could only describe as a reversed imprint, the angry blade flooded the enemy with his energy signature, causing mana poisoning. The hind leg of the Minios swelled like a balloon while its flesh burned, froze, and rot at the same time, making the earlier pain from the brain damage feel like a pinprick. But while the hapless criminal had exploded in a burst of rotten meat that made his associates either faint or puke, the creature was much bigger and wiser. In the time that it had taken War to kill a man, the blade could only corrupt the enormous limb it was stuck onto, giving the Minios the time to realize the danger it was in and bite off the foreleg before it was too late. By the Great Mother, did you really gift such a masterpiece to someone that has yet to recognize you as his master? Ragu used all the means at her disposal to study War from a distance, but Orion's workings were well cloaked. "Only the best for my beloved apprentices." Faluel lied through her teeth as the giant limb exploded and War returned to Litha's hand on its own. If fake mages can craft pieces that powerful with their limited magic, then we awakened Forge Masters need a damn ruler of the flames even more desperately than I thought. Whoever made War might be already on par with us. The Hydra was firmly against letting the abominations take part in the council, but now even her wished that Bytra would soon join their ranks. Meanwhile, Lith didn't move from his spot and kept studying his opponent. Not even amputating the whole hind leg weakened either its life force or mana flow. "If I get close without a plan, I will not last more than a few seconds." How the heck did I? Lith couldn't believe his own senses as he saw the limb regenerate almost as fast as it had been corrupted. Despite being temporarily crippled, the creature had no openings Lith could exploit. On top of that, even regenerating so much flesh and bones didn't weaken the creature. "That's it," Lith and Solus thought in unison. The wound's healing process had allowed them to understand the nature of their task. They had failed to notice it before because the other wounds were too small and they were too far away to take a good look at them. When the Minios came charging again, Lith was ready for him. He used earth magic to open a crater below the creature and gravity magic to send them both against the golden energy dome that covered the arena. When Lith released the second final sunset stored inside his Tier 5 magic holding ring, the black flames this time engulfed the giant lion, making it scream in agony. Minios were nothing like trolls, golems, or ghouls like Lith and Solus had wrongly assumed. The giant lion was a plant-animal hybrid that had lost the ability to awaken due to its fallen state, but was still able to draw upon world energy as long as it touched the ground. Minios didn't need breathing techniques to constantly regenerate their strength, and they could recover from any wound simply by extracting the nutrients from the soil. They were unstoppable predators, but once their weakness was exposed, they became sitting ducks. That's why the dome is so low and why the only time the monster's life force dwindled was during the throw. Not because this creature is incapable of flight, but because away from the ground it's nothing but an overgrown kitten. Lith thought, "Well done, you passed the test." Ligain dispelled the dome and rescued the Minios. "Any objection?" The members of the council shook their heads in reply. "Then Awakened Verhan is hereby a member of the Beast faction, and Faluel the Hydra will be held responsible for his actions until he learns to behave like a member of our society." Ligain then turned to the monster. "Thanks for your cooperation, Antir. I'll return you to your family as soon as your wounds heal." "No need to thank me, my lord." The monster bowed to the guardian. "If not for you, I'd be long since dead or still be a slave to my base instincts." "You can talk." Lith asked in surprise. I'm no Baylor, but not all monsters are mindless brutes. Antier replied. If I used magic, our fight might have ended differently, but since you couldn't take flight, I guess I needed a handicap as well. Menios are the only creatures that can use invigoration without limits. Their bodies are so attuned with Mogr that they just need to make contact with the ground to replenish their strength to its fullest. Ligain explained. They have several limitations to their magical abilities, but I hope that, by studying their condition, I can lift their fallen state and develop a better technique that Awakened can use to draw world energy. Yes, it's all so very noble of you. Inxialot cut him short. Where did you find an energy field ring, child? I thought their design was lost to time. It doesn't generate an energy field, just a gravity field. Lith rushed to reply in the hope to quell the greed with which the Lich was staring at his finger. Oh, Inxialot's disappointed look made Lith sigh in relief for one full second. Chapter 998 Treasure from the Past 2. That's annoying, but once one knows the basics, the rest comes easy. I can still work my way up to a proper energy field. The Lich said. You mean we can? Fila and Faluel stood between Inxialot and his prey as one. Lith is one of us, undead. Yes, whatever. I don't care who does it as long as those runes get preserved and shared with the Awakened community. I can give you a couple of centuries, child. After that, either I get my ring or you, and I will have a problem. Inxialot said. Guess what, you moron? 200 years from now, I'll either be dead or powerful enough to not care about your kin anymore. Lith thought. Seriously, though, where did you find it? Fila said. She cared for Lith more by the second, but her curiosity burned as strong as Inxialot's. Lith told them about the fungal creature he had met in Kulla and the present it had given him. Damned be the Odiat, Lotho roared. My brethren must have lost all hope in their mind to part from such treasure. More likely they thought it to be still a common item. They were cut off from the rest of the world and had no idea that what once was just a parlor trick is now so valuable. Also, I doubt they would have kept an ODI artifact anyway. Ligain said, look at the bright side. If you find your fungal brethren, they are likely to know everything about this energy field you talk about. Lith said, eager to ease the pressure of the gazes fixated on his hand. Genius. Inxialot clapped his hands. I'll immediately start looking for them. We're done here, right? Yes, we are. However, the king of liches disappeared, leaving Lotho talking to himself. Searching the entirety of Mogr for a single being is not an easy task. Gods, if I hate liches. Will you really share it? Despite her age, the behemoth was giving Lith the lovely smile of a kid in front of his Christmas presents. I'll give it a thought, but first I need to understand what an energy field is and what benefits I'd receive from the council in exchange for such knowledge. Lith politely but firmly replied, now I really need some rest and to speak with my mentor, if you please. I told you not to show off your damn crafts until your apprenticeship started, kid. Faluel said the moment they were back in the safety of her lair. I've already got a dozen orders for a blade like yours, and even more for that ring. According to your plan, there should have been some kind of riddle, not a fight. Lith replied, if I lost, Solus would have been trapped inside her ring for years. Ragu would have used Floria's awakening to keep me on a tight leash, and I would have been nothing more than a dignified slave. Point taken. Faluel sighed. Still, why didn't you show me that ring earlier? We could have still found a way to let you use it undetected. Because I thought it was crap. The runes are decrepit, and they don't do anything different from the others I studied from Huriel's booklet. Lith threw the gravity field ring to Faluel, who promptly examined it with invigoration and her forge mastering spells. By the Great Mother, what a piece of crap. Runes carved with mana crystals powder instead of being infused with mana, a messed up mana circulatory system, and I could shape a better pseudo-core with my feet. She blurted out. My point exactly. It's so bad that I didn't even bother crafting a new one, but I used first magic to replicate its effects on my own through my weapon. Lith said, the bad news is that most ODI runes are lost to time. There are almost no books about them, and the still existing few tomes belong to historians since they have no practical value. Faluel said, the good news is that we only need to decipher a few runes to be able to reverse engineer the whole thing and start working on upgrading the gravity to an energy field. How long would it take? Lith asked. Well, unless we find the right runes in a book, I'd say a few decades to figure out the modern runes with a trial-and-error procedure. After that, a few more decades for the energy field. 2 centuries tops. Faluel replied. 300 years in total? Lith couldn't believe his ears. More or less, if you, me, and Solus work together the whole time. Kid, research takes time and dedication. Why do you think Inksealot left you off the hook that easily? He is probably already working on a project that will take him at least 200 years to complete. He's a lich. They can afford to work alone because time is meaningless to them. Faluel said, what if I share it? After all, is what Royal Forge Masters would do. It would take much less time. Faluel said, if the Council pools its resources and we Forge Masters start to exchange our respective findings, the entire process should take about 2 years. The problem is that we'll lose the exclusive and there's no guarantee that others will really cooperate, instead of just leeching from those who share. Be them humans, beasts, plants, or undead, awakened are greedy creatures. No wonder you're losing the magical research race to fake mages. Lith sighed. We'll continue this conversation at another moment. I'm dead tired, and I promised Camilla to take her out on a date. Have fun while you can, my apprentice, because once I start teaching you, we'll take no breaks until invigoration stops working. Despite Faluel's girl next door looks and radiant smile, her words sounded awfully like a threat. Giera Continent, ex-city of Herveyor, now reduced to a bunch of ruins. After putting her resources to the test in other, Thrud Griffin had moved to the neighboring continent, like she always did after completing a rejuvenation cycle. She had spent centuries to create an alias that allowed her to live in the luxury she deserved and with access to the resources she needed. Giera was outside Tyrus's influence, and the local guardian had no affection for any of her friends. It made Giera the perfect place to lay low while Thrud enjoyed the fruits of her labors and honed her skills. Unfortunately, after the release of the plague, all of her hard work was lost. Even a magical blight was powerless against her enhanced physique and that of her minions, but the plague had destroyed society as she knew it. Damn it all. Thrud wanted to smash the crystal bottle she was drinking from in a fit of rage, but finding another would be nigh impossible. I can't go back to Garland with the tight security all 3 great countries have established, but staying in this dead place is driving me crazy. It wasn't just a figure of speech. With the fall of human civilization, the continent had fallen into the hands of emperor beasts, who were able to identify Thrud from her smell and chase her away if she refused to leave. She was a very powerful mage, even more thanks to the replicas of the Griffin Kingdom's strongest artifacts, but there were hundreds of emperor beasts living together. Some were as old as she was and nearly as powerful. Chapter 999 Bonds of Trust Part 1. Awakened mages and their bloodlines ruled the only human cities remaining on the Giera continent, but things didn't go any better for Thrud there. Somehow, the Awakened would become suspicious of her the moment she used her powers and refused to grant her hospitality. Unbeknownst to Thrud, it was due to the vortex her rainbow mana core generated to imitate the effects of invigoration and provide her with unlimited mana. Her long existence, coupled with a lifetime of murder and secrets, weighed heavily on her psyche. Thrud was on the run ever since she could remember, to protect her father's legacy from Tyrus's clutches and fulfill his dream to unify the Garland continent under an immortal ruler. I was supposed to be enjoying my wealth and find a way to extend the gift of immortality to the future imperial family, not scavenge for food and sew my own clothes. What good are gold and jewels in a place where a piece of fresh bread is a myth? Her rants were becoming more and more frequent, in an attempt to fill the silence surrounding her. She was an extraordinary hunter and tailor, skills that would make her welcome in any human settlement, but only if Thrud stopped using her magic and lived like a commoner. Doing that would mean to trample over her pride as the true queen of the Griffin Kingdom and give up on the luxuries she felt entitled to. All the human awakened of the Giera continent were actually in her same boat, but she didn't care. With the loss of craftsmen, farmers and stockbreeders had become the new rich. Even awakened kept them in high regard because all the magic in Mogar couldn't create food. On top of that, to pass down the practical knowledge necessary to grow all the edible plants and vegetables would take years. If once the ancient mage's main worry had been to develop their skills, Now they were focused on avoiding that a single bad harvest or common cold could wipe out what remained of the human race. Beasts and plants had no such worries. They usually moved around naked and considered food anyone who trespassed on their turf. The beast empire that had been born after the fall of human civilization was now the most advanced and wealthy on Giera, but humans had a hard time adapting to the beast's morals. Emperor beasts would take in anyone, but only as long as they behaved. The beasts would teach kids how to read and write, and to adults how to hunt, farm, or whatever job they were talented for. At the same time, however, the concept of redemption, fair trial, or prisons didn't exist in their society. The moment someone committed a crime for no acceptable reason, the culprit would be put down like a rabid dog. Some people couldn't accept such a harsh and wild social order where everyone had to either make themselves useful or scram the moment they came of age. Yet most remained because the beasts offered them shelter from the weather, protection from the monsters that were now free to roam the lands, and healthcare. Humans had tried to awaken everyone to repopulate the continent faster and make all humans capable of wielding magic, but it had been a disaster. Children wouldn't get ill, but they would kill themselves or their parents using spells like toys. Many meek and gentle adults, once they got a taste of true power, would become overbearing toward their less talented peers and enforce the law of the jungle until their victims or their masters killed them. To make things worse, very few had the patience to practice accumulation for years to become stronger. With the constant threat of bad weather, monsters, starvation, and their own neighbors, many rushed their body development and exploded like gruesome fireworks. In the end, less than a tenth of those who had become awakened without a full-time tutor survived, so the experiment was deemed a failure and postponed to a moment when the masters could dedicate more time to classes. All the remaining humans had been collected in a few megalopolises that couldn't survive without their awakened rulers enforcing the law, treating diseases before they turned into plagues, and protecting the fields. I can't believe they awakened even those useless cripples whose only talent is to be naturally immune to the plague, whereas they refused to teach me. Thrud roared. I'm so close, so damn close, yet I can never figure out the last piece of the puzzle. All living creatures have a core that acts like a heart for the mana flow, but only the so-called awakened are capable to train their core and make it stronger over time. I use my father's machine to feed my core with those of others, yet I never manage to sense the pulse of mana. The machine renews my life force and rids my body of the impurities that make people grow old, to the point that I reached human perfection. My flesh offers no resistance to mana. I can cast countless spells without putting any stress on my physique, so it can't be a matter of something being wrong with my body or lack of talent. I mastered all the damn specializations, for the god's sake. What am I lacking? Only her echo replied to the question, and Thrud finally snapped. She chanted her spell, hating each word she spoke and hand signs she drew, considering each one of them a reminder of her constant failures. Purple flames invaded the empty halls of the house that she had spent years to build, while earth magic caused a quake that split the ground and made the walls crumble. To her, the sound of destruction was now a better alternative to silence. Thrud then walked through the rubble and started to destroy Hervair, the capital of her own grand duchy that she had named after her mother. It had taken Thrud generations to reach such a position. She had introduced herself as a mage, became a noble, and then faked her aging while introducing one of her meat puppets as her daughter before taking her place, starting the cycle from young to old again. She knew Hervair's every stone and every tree because she had shaped the city according to the memories of her birthplace. She loved it with all her heart because it reminded her of the old times, back when she was still the princess of the Griffin Kingdom and her future was carved in stone. Tyrus was supposed to acknowledge her father's genius and become his spouse. Arthan's achievements would have surpassed even Valoran's, and with her help, he would have unified the Garland continent. Then, once he grew tired of bearing the weight of the crown and the responsibilities it carried, Thrud would have taken the throne and made sure that her subjects thrived. Yet now her capital was just like all the stories Thrud's mother told her as a child, an empty lie, and the Mad Queen hated Hervair for it. There was no one to serve her, no one left that would admire her beauty or talent. Thrud felt as if Mogr had turned its back on her one time too many. Why everyone leaves me in the end? Not even her heart-wrenching sobs hindered the Mad Queen's spellcasting as she razed the city that once had been her pride and joy. Chapter 1000 Bonds of Trust Part 2. I had countless husbands and children, yet none of them awakened. Death took them away from me before I could even grow attached to them. Even those I offered to share eternity with me treated me like a monster and forced me to shut them up. Now all of my subjects are dead, and all I'm left with is stone and gold. Is this Tyrus's doing as well? Has her curse reached me thanks to her blood that runs through my veins? I'm not letting you take everything from me again, you monster. I'd rather destroy everything myself. Thrud unleashed another spell, and a city block fell. In her wrath and madness, she almost didn't notice an emerald bolt approaching to her position, blasting through the arrays that still defended Herveyor from all threats. Almost. A dragon. Thrud instantly regained her focus as the magical formation self-repaired and provided her with the information they had gathered about the invader. It's been a long time since I killed one. Your flesh will make a meal worthy of a queen. Arthan's armor wrapped Thrud's body, and Arthan's sword appeared in her hand as her face was twisted in a grimace of fury. Yet no protection could save her from what happened next. The emerald bolt gracefully landed in front of her, as if he weighed a few grams instead of several tons, and shape-shifted into the most handsome man she had ever seen. A handsome man with emerald shoulder-length hair and purple eyes who was kneeling at her feet, according to the etiquette that the Griffin Kingdom prescribed to loyal vassals when meeting their rulers. Jormund Nidho reports for duty. Your humble servant begs your forgiveness for taking so long to find the last heir of the great king. The man that Lith knew as Jakra even spoke the ancient language of the kingdom. Thrud didn't hear it for centuries, yet she could still understand it perfectly. Tears kept streaming down her cheeks, but now she cried with joy. Do you swear that you are not here to attack me? She kept weaving her spells and preparing her relics. Thrud had been betrayed too many times to believe in free meals. I only come to serve, my liege. Jormund started to tell her about the Golden Griffin and the many legacies that Arthan had left behind for his heir. At first, Thrud didn't believe him, but the more the stranger spoke, the more many mysteries of her homeland made sense. Are you really here for me? The Mad Queen had already fallen in love with that voice. For the first time in her life, she had met someone who knew who she was and shared her dream. I entered the Golden Griffin when I was a little over 400 years old. If I fail to awaken, I should have around 600 more left, and I intend to spend them all to give you everything you deserve. All I ask in return is to know the name of my queen. Jormund said, My name is Thrud Ethelid Darren Griffin, rightful queen to the Griffin Kingdom, but you can call me Thrud. I hereby make you Duke Jormund Nidho. She patted his left shoulder, then the right, and then his head with Arthan's sword. Stand up, Lord Jorun. There's much we need to talk about, and even more we have to do, yet it can all wait. I'm tired of being alone. Her hand ran through his hair, caressing Jormund's face before moving down his chest. The physical intimacy aroused Thrud as much as it disgusted Jormund. After escaping from Heriol, he had slept for months before noticing that something was wrong with him. The life force of dragons was incredibly strong, to the point of being capable of healing itself with time. After spending centuries sealed inside the Lost Academy, Jormund had realized the existence of the slave spell that now impaired his mind only because he could feel his body trying to fix what he had always assumed was a natural development of his life force after mastering all elements and several martial arts. The moment he had attempted to get in touch with one of his relatives, the spell had forced him to find the Mad Queen. Griffin Kingdom, near the top of Lochra Mountain. Lith had thought a lot about where to bring Camilla for her birthday. He would have preferred to take her to a place where he could give her an experience similar to Earth's summer on the beach, but she was born around mid-spring. Not only were the seas still too cold to bathe, but she also refused to wear even a one-piece swimsuit in presence of witnesses. It would have been the equivalent of walking around in her underwear, and people were quite modest on Mogar. Without Solus, an inhabited island would mean no people, but no comforts as well. I'm sorry, but having no bathroom, sleeping on the ground, no privacy whatsoever, and being dependent on you to cook my meals sounds as romantic as another boot camp, was her reply. Hence Lith had taken her to a high-class resort where they could be immersed in the mountain's natural splendor without missing anything civilization had to offer. After becoming a royal constable, Camilla had started to travel around the kingdom and do late hours. Thanks to Journey, she always managed to come back home for dinner, but after that, they would often leave again and only rarely sleep in their own beds. Between the terrible crime scenes she had witnessed and spending so much time interrogating criminals, Camilla was on the verge of a breakdown. She felt terribly tired, but most of all, dirty inside, as if all the horrors that rich and poor alike perpetrated to indulge in their vices had tainted her. Gods, this place is just perfect, Camilla said while looking at the beautiful scenery the mountain lake surrounded by luscious green offered to the guests dining on the terrace. The Flying Griffin Resort had its own gate. It connected the resort with the important cities of the kingdom, allowing it to always have the best foods and provide its guests with anything they might need at a moment's notice. I promise you that we'll do this beach thing when I'm less stressed. Camilla couldn't take her eyes off the beauty of the full moon in the clear sky and its reflection on the lake. Together, they provided enough natural light to watch the night wildlife and gave the valley where the resort had been built the feeling of a mystical place where time had stopped. Right now, all I need is a warm, comfortable bed and room service. Lots of room service. If I take one more step, I'm afraid my feet will fall off. It's a good thing that I reserved a suite then. Lith chuckled while pointing at her red stiletto heels that lay near the table legs. Camilla wore them along with the red skin-tight cocktail dress she had chosen for their first real date in a long while where she could turn her work amulet off. She wanted that night to be special, but the moment Lith had offered her to dine alone in their room because he wanted to speak with her about important matters, Camilla had immediately accepted and given her sore legs some relief.